All right, we are live. Welcome everybody. We got a good show today. First things first, I'd like to give a big shout out to US ARC for supporting us as a community and fighting for yours and my rights to own the reptiles and amphibians that we hold near and dear, along with just fighting nonsense lobbyist proposal legislation to infringe on any keepers' rights. So thank you, US ARC. Please support US ARC, even if you can't donate. Like, share their content. They're at a lot of big expos. So yes, please support US ARC. Most of you people, I think, are. It's definitely an organization that anybody that's new into the hobby must know about. And then big shout out to the Reptile Super Show. It's coming up January 11th and 12th. Definitely a must-see expo if you can make it. And that's in LA, more precisely the Pomona Fairgrounds. That's an excellent show put on by Rami. Awesome place to network, meet people. Just an all-around awesome large show. Today we got a guest, John Rice from Fathom Hogs. Dave may be joining us later. We'll see. He's kind of busy today. I think he's supposed to come around in the next half hour. And so we're going to bring John Rice on right now. There we are. This has worked out. There's John.
Oh,
John, yeah, John and I, we've known each other for about, I guess, like 10 years now, I think. Yeah, like 10 years, maybe 10 and a half.
Yeah, I would say it's probably been about 10 and a half. When we first meet, Jeff, I think I called you and started harassing you about the Arctic gene. And then that blossomed into one heck of a friendship, that's for sure. We've leaned on each other quite a few times over the years as far as like learning and everything around not just hognose snakes, but life. We've talked about everything under the sun. So
yeah, we met in a Burger King parking lot.
It was our first date.
Yeah, I remember that. That's actually the first two times that's where we met was the same Burger King parking lot. That was near Columbus. That was near you.
Yeah, well, no, shoot, we went it was about an hour drive for each of us. I remember that. It was pretty good right there off 13. So
yeah. And then we're gonna have there's gonna be there's a lot of people in here. There's already a lot of people in here. Normally it starts out a little slow. Today we already got a bunch of people. So we have like Fairly Hog Parents, Joe Schmo, Anthony, Reps in Texas, Brandon, Moonstone Plains, Hip Hogs, Allie, John Caro, Vartinus, Runecine, and others. So right now you're getting ready to brumate the majority of your hognose, and you brumate all of your babies and all of your adults pretty much at the same time.
Yeah, I always do that. So I don't brumate all of them at the same time. I try to stagger it just a little bit. The babies I don't put as hard of a brumation on. So the adults I put down about 2 weeks ago, and they'll be down until probably the 1st of February. But the babies I'm going to start cooling down right about Tuesday of next week. The room will start coming down. In my area here, everything's concrete floors. I got insulated walls. I got 2x6 exterior walls to make sure everything's nice and insulated, and more insulation in the ceiling than I care to admit. So it takes a while. It takes a while to actually come all the way down. Maybe I would say about 6 to 7 days. So it gives that nice gradual, temperature swing. And, one of the things I know me and you have talked about it as well, Jeff, I mean, the light cycle as well. I have artificial light inside these areas, for a majority of the year to keep them feeding, keep simulating the middle of summer. So I got a real good feeding response. And, this time of year, I start bringing that light cycle down. And then when brumation actually does start, everything will be the same as outside, at our latitude and longitude. It'll be all the same as what it is currently. So they get those nice short days that they want to be able to, for the brumation and everything.
And you have some windows in there too to get some natural light in there. So
you
don't really
I do.
Okay.
I can, let me lock this so you can kind of see a little bit, but I got natural, that's south-facing window. That way I'm able to get all the natural light inside of this area. You know, my baby room's relatively small, you know, though. It's, you know, I would say 10 foot by maybe 20. So it's not a huge space, but I really can get them in here pretty good. I utilize, you know, some of those what are they called, Jeff? Those little sandwich drawers from PM Herps. PM Herps
those
rack.
ones. Yeah.
You know, they're good for starting out babies, but I like to get them into these Freedom Breeder Series tubs. You know, I'd like to one day when I have a little bit more space, maybe the mini ARS racks, like you're starting to keep yours in. I really like those racks. I like the footprint of them. You know, for being able to get those babies turned on and thriving relatively quick.
Yeah, I don't know if Brian Hahn wants to admit it. The whole reason those racks were made because I kept harassing him to make a baby rack system. I talked about years.
I remember us talking about that. You know, it was it's good. Hopefully this doesn't. I'm wearing my shirt, and when I first came on and was like demoing to make sure I could get in on everything, it was tracking the Jesus face as well because you know I can move around the room and this tracks me as
it's following you pretty good. It's not following just Jesus; it's following you. Plus, Jesus is
for a
with
minute,
us all
it was
the time.
doing like a little stagger thing. It was going, you know, up and down, trying not deciding who to follow. So maybe it won't do that again.
Now, the one thing is, like you said, like you do a lot of the photo period, the natural light cycle. And have you observed this? Hognoses that are more inclined to eat once the day cycle comes out, such as like leaving a live mouse with a baby all night. Baby just want to eat it. Light comes on, or light, and then within 10 minutes of the light coming on, and you know these diurnal or more diurnal reactive species then are more inclined to eat. And then they start eating, and they're more inclined to eat when there's daylight sometimes. And then also I've seen
I agree with that, Jeff. You know, it's funny sometimes. You know, on some of the trickier babies when I'm starting out, you really, you know, you're focusing on those animals, but you'll drop and maybe leave an offering of, you know, 2 scented items or the 1 scented item that you haven't tried yet. You know, if you're getting something feeding, and it's funny, you'll work with it that evening or later in the day, nothing. And then you leave it with it overnight to just see if it wants to, you know, come across it and eat it instead of like forcing it in their face. And it's funny because you'll come in the room in the morning, just like you said, when the lights come on, and they'll eat almost immediately. It's funny when you see that happen when you're going through to either pull, you know, some of the mice that you left the night before. So,
yeah. So anyway, let's see if we have. Nobody's asked any questions yet. I'm surprised. Usually people, if anybody's got any questions, this is a good time to ask it. You're going to spur on some good conversation. So
we're gonna do a lot of good stuff tonight. There it went. Track Jesus. There it went.
I figure, well, you'll be on again. This won't be the only one. You know, since I do this every 2 weeks, it's like fairly often. You know, it's quite a bit for me. But anyway, this is a good initial one.
Nah, this will be good. Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff that you and I could cover that could, you know, a lot of these people out here that are either just starting out or even people like ourselves. You know, I learn stuff every year. You know, just little tips and tricks, and you know, it's something that you know there's always things to add. I try to make mental notes, you know, every year on things. You know, this year, you know, my thing that I learned is do not spray your animals with RO water.
The fuck is RO water?
So it's reverse osmosis water.
Oh, reverse osmosis. Okay.
Yeah. So you remove everything out. Well, Jeff, I don't know if you've done any research. I go down rabbit holes on many things, but RO water, you know, long term for me and you can be bad.
Yeah.
You know,
see, I've heard that. I've heard like the benefits. They say I've heard people say it tastes really good, but then that's lacking all the minerals and stuff. So I don't.
So it starts pooling. You know, it pulls from inside of your body, whether it's your bones with calcium or your teeth or anything. Maybe it might be stripping you of some other micronutrients as well, just locking onto those when we go in. Well, you know, I was spraying, you know, some of the babies this time of year when I'm sure you noticed it as well, being up here in Ohio with me.
The dry shit.
Yeah, well, no, well, it gets dry, you know, it gets dry this time of year. The heaters are kicking on more, smoke in the air of all the humidity in it. You know, it's a little bit easier for me in the middle of summer because everything's warm outside, so my heaters aren't really kicking on in my rooms. It's 80, 78, 86 degrees, whatever it is daytime. I have my stuff swing up and down throughout the day. But, this time of year, it's smoking all the moisture inside the room. So I was spraying snakes with RO water. Well, it was pulling some of those minerals, I feel like, out of skin and making it harder for them to shed. It was actually when they shed, the skin felt crispy.
Oh, weird.
The shed skin, instead of like what me and you would want to see after a nice fresh shed snake skin, where it like peels off and it comes off and you can like pull it a little bit. Has that little bit of a stretchability to it, and it was removing that. Well, it was having snakes, it was making it more difficult for them to shed. So I did some research. I was like, what's going on here? How can I spike this humidity in my rooms? I have concrete floors with enamel coatings on them, so I was dumping water on the floor to bring the spike up inside the room. Well, come to find out, I was like, well, let's look at what I'm putting on the snakes instead. And it was RO water, and I switched to softened water after that, just like something I would get out of my tap inside my home instead of post RO system, and the shedding problem stopped immediately.
Oh, really?
So it was just good. That was something I learned. It was something I learned this year, and it was one of the things like I won't make that mistake in the future. And thank you for giving me this platform tonight to us just rap about it a little bit. But it's stuff that we can pass on to the rest of the community, and we can learn together from it.
Yeah. I have the same problem. Any of these northern states. I mean, Minnesota and Wisconsin, even worse, because when your furnace kicks on, and then the air is heated, all the air expands, and the water molecules are then like divided amongst the expansions. And the more heat you need, the drier the air gets. And I'd get some of those females where they get like these really like dry sheds. You could see them like coming on, and I'm like, oh, this female's gonna shed out. She's gonna have a tough time. So the moist hides are of course really good, but with babies, it's hard, especially when we're raising them in temporary homes, and we don't have like a ton of space. I did have this one female. You'll like this one. This is the one that I openly want to just like go out and tell people to do, because you'd probably get some immediate flack for it. But I had this one female, she's having shedding issues. I put CeraVe on her, which is a face cream. And dude, it worked so good. She had like the most beautiful shed skin. It came out perfectly. But if I start going on there and telling everybody use CeraVe, I mean, I was like, you don't need to use CeraVe, but it was very effective the time I did use it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the thing right there. Same thing with the softened water. I mean, if you have some really nice softened water, when you go to wash your hands, it feels like it takes forever to get the soap off, because you have that lubrication on your hands from the softened water. Whereas like RO water or some real hard water, your soap doesn't lather. So it's something that I just learned. It's one of the things I learned. One of the biggest mistakes I made early on, Jeff, I know I talked with you about it. It's like, I don't know, maybe my third year breeding. I went down halfway in brumation. I try not to bother the animals when they're in brumation. I went down halfway and I'd left my thermostat on my males. And, so they were like hunkering down on the 88-degree temperature hotspot in the back, even though the room was, 45.
Oh, yeah, they were just probably sitting on it nonstop then.
Nonstop. I went down to change water bowls, a couple weeks in, because, I brumate everything just as it sits almost. And I went down to change water bowls. This was when I had the snake room in my house, and the males came out mouth open, wanting to like bite everything. And I was like, man, you shouldn't even be moving that fast. It's so cold inside that space. But, needless to say, I was still in my infancy of doing a lot of breeding back in, but I had about 200 eggs that year. And I think I had like 2 fertile eggs.
That's not good. I remember you when I was talking about that, and I was like, I think you're keeping the snakes too hot. And that was a common one, because there were some breeders that would. And I remember I was talking to Mitch about it, and Mitch said, he goes, yeah, I think the guy purposely told me to do that. A big hognose breeder was suggesting to keep the stuff really basically hot as soon as he brought it out of cool down, like 90 degrees. And I'm like, you don't want to do that. So
no, you live and you learn, though. I don't even
yeah.
I don't even start heating up my females really like belly heat at all. Until like July every year. I just have ambient temperature inside the room for the most part when they're breeding. And when I turn on the room, it's not like, just like when it cools down, it doesn't warm up in 2 days, 3 days. It takes a week. This concrete's 40 degrees. The walls are all cold. And it's not like I have like furnaces blowing in this room. I got a very simple setup. I just use the radiant, oil-filled heaters. It looks like a radiator, and then on a thermostat. And it just, and then I have it ramp up from, 78 degrees in the morning. It ramps up to 84 midday, and then it ramps all the way back down at 2 degree increments coming up, per hour throughout the day. So I have a nice curve. Then I also track that with, gobies and things like that to see how my fluctuations, and I have all that data logged, for a couple years, to be able to look back and be like, all right, this year I did great. Why? What were my parameters, during that time? The only thing I didn't track, which I probably should at this point, is humidity levels as well. But during those same times when I am doing the breeding and it's early on, we have a lot of rain in the spring. So I feel like the humidity levels already inside of this building are probably pretty spiked at that point in time versus like now.
Yeah.
Especially with the year we had. It was so dry this year, here in Ohio. So.
And then in the wild too, where they're from, they're getting a lot of spikes of humidity, then low humidity, even throughout the spring. Yeah. Even though spring, like a lot of times it is relatively humid there, and then the soil they go into has a degree of moisture, so that's they're getting humidity there. Like you're saying, I don't really having a good hygrometer is tough. I do know like my place stays like 40 to 60% humidity, but it really doesn't fluctuate too much during like the spring unless it gets cold again, because then like you're saying, the furnace has to kick on. But yeah, I don't think it's an interesting one, but I really don't think it's like important. Well, I mean, like if the steaks are getting dry, that's not good. But as long as they're staying hydrated,
it's not
then it's okay. I don't think it's a big difference.
It could be I doubt, like what you said, it's too much of a reason why you would have a success.
Yes,
but it could be just another data set point to track. If you did have that great year, how can you mimic that the best as possible? And I've talked with you in length about this. I try not to overthink things and try to get too far. I try to throw out everything that we've been told, over the past 30 years about husbandry of reptiles, and look at where they're from. And I'm not saying you got to match it, but if you can incorporate that into your program, I think you can, have better successes there as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because I was talking to a few people about that, learning their, the phenology of hognose, how do you respond to the climate in the wild. And they're like, well, how do you the thing is, well, we do it a little different. We take things from it, such as altering their humidity, keeping them clean, doing brumation temperatures, brumation cycles to induce spring-like breeding activity, but then the actual care, are we keeping them in bioactive central plains, short and tall grass prairie setups? No, we're keeping them on coarse wood chips and stuff like that because it's easy to clean, and then we're adapting things that we know about them in the wild to the care in captivity. And it works. I mean, you and I, we both get pretty large clutches from hognose snakes. Actually, I think we probably get too many friggin' eggs at this point. We're suffering from success, so we can't. So anyway, stuff we're doing works. And then we have Joshua Paris. Any tips of changes to brumation for first-time baby hogs? And that's what John was talking about. And John, you can give Joshua what you like to do, because that's the reason I was asking you, hey, do you brumate your babies and adults at the same time? And it makes sense. You're like, well, I don't brumate the babies as long. Obviously, they are a little, more sensitive to that stuff, while the adults are a lot more, older and robust. So if you want to go with your details on how you brumate your baby hogs, especially because John's brumating baby hogs all the time.
I do, like I said, brumate them a little bit shorter. I try to brumate my adults 10 to 12 weeks, babies about 8. So, I mean, they're not getting like a 4-week brumation, but they're getting a pretty good brumation. But I know, this is something that you do, Jeff, as well. Just like what I was talking about, adding the humidity to the room. I don't really change much inside this space, But I think, on a smaller scale and smaller collections, and as long as you keep the substrate a little bit more moist, coco core or peat, with a decent amount of humidity inside of it, not wet, not to where you can squeeze water out, and not even like incubation media, but just that trace amounts of moisture. I think that's important. But I make sure I keep that humidity inside of my snake room about 60 to 70% even through the winter. Right now, I mean, you can't quite see it on my my window over there. I bet you could. This is a good camera, but there's actually condensation inside of the room. So, I mean, there's a decent amount of humidity already inside of here. But I bring them down slowly. Make sure that your humidity levels are good, because I think the most dangerous thing, especially for fresh babies going into brumation, is too much moisture loss. And it's really going to rock those babies. And they're going to have a tougher time recovering from that. Jeff, you've made great observations. I have as well. If you brumate something in a moist environment versus a crispy, dry environment, your hognose snakes, when they come out of brumation, are craving water. You can watch them just drink and drink and drink and drink, which is not good. They should need water, but not crave it like that. So I think just keeping the humidity level will be great. And then bringing them down nice and slow. I don't think you want to do anything like throw them into the fridge. I like telling people staggering, plugging your heat source. If there's any way for you to bring them down into a basement, into a cool area, that's one of the best places. I get my stuff very cold out here every year, though. I mean, last year there was that time here for about a week where it got 28 degrees inside my snake room. Didn't lose a single snake out of there's about 1,200 animals inside of here. I lost, besides one, and that was an anathoristic mandarin rat snake. So no hognose snakes died, even when it got down that low. So I do think they encounter that in the wild a little bit, but that's my standard inside of here. Like, I bring it down, and it stays pretty much the same as, what it is here. I don't know if you can see it here. Yeah, it's the FP5. I've got Sani chips. I've got water there. We do mist these down, but then I just, I'm very cognizant on what the humidity actually is inside of the space to make sure these animals don't get smoked. So that's important there. But bringing them down nice and slow and giving them time to recover as well. In the spring, don't rush them, waking them up. I've had snakes that I thought were going to die, going into brumation. They actually came out of brumation looking a little bit better. Made sure they were in that perfect humid setting inside of the room, like all the snakes are. It's not like I focused on just those ones. I treat them all the same. But brought it down and brought them up, and that was the first time they ate when they woke up from brumation. So, and you're talking, 4 or 5 months after they hatched, and snake after 4 or 5 months, especially in a room that gets 84 degrees every day, and then they're introduced to warmth and everything, they're burning calories. Yeah, so they are getting a little bit skinny at that point in time.
We got Head chiming in. He says, since he switched to COCO, a lot of my girls don't have bulb tails. Even some that's had them, they went down over time. I don't know. It's because the humidity had anything to do with that. If you're actually seeing them reduced, then yeah, probably, Victor. And that's the one thing that's been speculated about bulb tail. In the wild where hognose are from, they're going down into loose substrate that holds a degree of moisture all the time. The ground's never like barren dry down there. And if it is, it's very little bit of it. And then they're hanging out in grass clumps in the morning. It's probably dewy. The other thing is, too, I think a lot of it has to do with us keeping the hognose at really high temps all the time in relation to the wild where they're having ups and downs. And then they're constantly having metabolism spikes. And then we're feeding them an excess of food. And then, yeah, maybe the dry conditions. There's a lot of things that can exacerbate it. That condition. It's weird though, because I get a mix. I get bulb tails, and I get females right next to them that have the same conditions that don't have it. And John, I'm sure, do you have experienced bulb tail too?
Oh yeah. I have some. It's interesting. It happened more earlier in my hognose breeding than it does currently. I would say out of, I don't know, from last year I kept back maybe 40 females or so. One one's starting to develop bulb tail, and then out of some of the other animals that I kept back over the years, there's just a handful. You know, I'm saying
that's pretty
Jeff,
good.
At your point in time, it's probably less than 1% that developed that. But yeah, I think the humidity is a big factor with that too. Just them being able to release that musk, you know, a little bit more freely than if it gets like almost like a plug in the back of it. You know, but I've seen, you know, I've had females with a bulb tail breed just fine, you know, and do well for years. I mean, do I feel like it has some type of impact? I do. You know, I think, you know, it could, you know, lead to fertility issues later on down the road if the male hognose snake isn't able to insert a hemipene because of that. But I've seen lots of females breed just fine with those as well. So.
Yeah, I think there's this one. They took most of the pictures down, but it's from an old website. They had a lot of really big females with the fucking biggest musk glands, like enlarged bulb tails, and they're all laying eggs. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's like I think some of it has to probably do with most of them being like giant, overweight, older hognose, and then they have the bulb tail and everything, and it's just like makes them more, or like let's say less likely to be receptive to breeding. Because I've seen some of those real big females too. They'll open up their cloaca and they'll wave their tail. They're very receptive, and then they just kind of like give up. And then so when the male's trying to breed them, then the female's like, so it's kind of like on and off. And if he's not right there, then they don't breed sometimes. It's a weird thing that I have seen it. But yeah, the whole bulb tail thing, I still get some with it. You know, even with my moist hides, I should try just because like I've done with this, you know, just COCO coir, you know, and sand mix alone. That one, though, is kind of tough in the large enclosures because it gets dirty a little quicker. And it's harder to spot clean. So
yeah, it's so messy too. You know, I've seen there. You know, there's a couple other people I know that use that mix. Mitch uses that mix down in Florida. You know, South Florida. I don't know how some of those guys breed though down there. It's just so hot all the time. You know, I'm able to utilize you know, the natural temperature swings up here, which I think is a gold mine for a lot of colubrids, honestly, just being able to get them cool. You know, being in South Florida, you know, Miami, you know, Naples, places like that down there. I mean, everything's different. I mean, the light cycles are different down there. And it just gets ungodly hot. So I think there's a place for everything for sure. But, you know, in my program, I can't do the COCO and the sand mix or peat mix and sand mix. I am too much of a neurotic neat freak when it comes to things that just the dust alone on things would drive me crazy. So, and I know if it doesn't, if that stuff dries out, it's, you know, if anyone has dealt with COCO or peat, it's just like a cloud of brown dust that goes everywhere when you're moving it around. Yeah. I mean, I know during breeding season, I have, you know, trash cans full of peat and water. That's why I use in all my nest boxes. I like peat because the high acid in it. Sometimes it can stain the eggs if they're in there for a couple days or whatnot. But the anti-mold that comes with the peat itself, I love that. You know, the only thing that's going to mold inside of something like that in a nest box or in an actual egg box that I found is either a dead egg or snake poop. You know, and that's about it. So anything else that comes into contact with it really inhibits the mold. And I love that. I love it about that stuff.
Yeah, the COCO coir, like sometimes if you like to lift up the eggs, the bottom of them's like will be stained. Is that what you're seeing with the peat moss too? I used to use a lot of peat moss. The one problem is like, I mean, I probably should have just tried different peat moss brands, but the couple ones that I tried, I'd always get fucking mites in them. I'd get the wood mites. The wood mites. I get the wood mites in there sometimes.
Yeah, I've never got that from peat. But you know, I'm sure if you've got them from that, you know, it'll happen to, you know, eventually. Those wood mites can be a bear sometimes. You know, they just love. You know, it's all dependent on you know, a lot of things. You know, once you're introduced to them, you know, they can kind of be a pain in the ass for just a brief minute. They're not dangerous to the snakes or anything like that. You know, they're not feeding off the snakes, so you don't really have to worry about that from that standpoint or anything. But you know, where I get my Sandy chips delivered, I get them by the pallet, and you know, it's a feed store. So I try to get there on the day that they're dropped off, because a lot of those grain mites and things come in on dog food, and just with the sandy chips being stored around the dog food, it can get pretty tough. Jesus, the fucking beard on that thing.
Yeah, he looks like the guy in your shirt almost. You're right.
I know. Hey, look, I got him on my shirt. That's awesome. Yeah.
How's it going, Dave?
Not too bad. How do I sound?
You sound good this time, actually.
Yeah.
That's good. I think we've got it figured out.
Were you coming from a poker tournament?
No, William Philippek was here. He picked up some rat racks with his father. So we went out to dinner afterwards, and they're heading home.
Okay. Thanks for the serious answer to my statement.
There's a real answer, buddy. The truth. You guys can just carry on. I'll just jump in when I'm ready.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we're talking about. Hey, have you ever seen this, John, with the peat moss? I've seen it with coco coir. Sometimes it actually stains the interior fluid in the egg, and it looks like tobacco juice. It's a small percent. I've gotten
maybe. You know, that's a tough one, Jeff, because I like to let them come all the way out. You know, I'm past the tearing eggs and you know, pulling snakes out, you know, kind of thing. So
I don't pull them out, but I'll look in the eggs sometimes.
Yeah. I'll have to really be a little bit more observant on that one. I've seen stained eggs, so it would make sense that the fluid inside the egg itself would actually be stained as well.
Yeah, I've seen some get pretty stained where it looks like tobacco juice inside. The snake's fine. The snakes are always okay in there. It's never seems like it really infiltrated that vascular membrane that brings in, you know, oxygen to the baby. It doesn't seem like it affects that. It doesn't seem like the baby's ever getting an infection. It doesn't seem to erode or infect or cause any bacterial infection to like the yolk sac. So I've never had any baby. I should take it's rare. I see it maybe like 1 in 5 or 700. It seems like, and yeah, the inside the eggs is like tobacco juice.
Yeah. No, that's it. That's an interesting one right there. That's for sure. So, yeah. So all right, Jeff. What got you into hognose snakes? Well, all right. Let's go back a little bit farther. Your first snake that you owned was one of my favorite snakes.
Probably still is. It's still one of my favorite snakes. I even though I don't own any, I'd still, man, when people see when I see clutches of them, I remember I got this when I got my first pet milk snake, I got a little book with it too, and it was just a milk snake book, and it kind of covered all of the different species of milk snake, and it was brief because there's 26 subspecies or whatever there is. And I had an Eastern milk snake. That was my first snake I really fell in love with. I still really like their colors, even though there might be prettier, milk snakes out there. Like I really like red milks because they look like just a prettier version of an Eastern milk.
Yeah.
And I really like the coastal plains. The funny thing is, of all my North American, Lamprepeltis, I still like Eastern milk snakes, red milks, and then the coastal plains the most. And those are all variations or integrates of the Eastern milk.
Yeah. No, 100%. That honestly, so my first pet milk snake I bought as an Eastern milk snake from a little feed store that's local to me. And, back when we could buy stuff like that at feed stores, I think it was like $15 or something. And they had it labeled as the Eastern milk snake, and it was a coastal plains. So that was my first experience with Lamprepeltis.
So that was your first pet snake too, is basically an Eastern milk snake as well.
It basically was. So my first actual pet snake, though, and I learned a lot from this snake, was rough green snake.
Oh, interesting. So,
yeah, that was my first pet snake. I kept it for I would say maybe a year and a half, and back then there wasn't that much information on how to keep snakes, obviously, because we're getting old, Jeff. It was a little bit different. So I kept it in a 10-gallon aquarium with aquarium gravel and a stick, water bowl with, like little guppies and stuff in it because I thought it was cool. Well, I kept it for a while. It was doing great. I loved watching it. Sat there and just loved watching it eat crickets, and grasshoppers. I'd go out in the yard and catch grasshoppers and feed it to them. And then one day it died. Oh. And I was like, what? you know, and I was just, it just tore me apart. It was something that really impacted me as a kid. You know, I was sad because I just loved that little rough green snake, and it literally had eaten some of the aquarium gravel. You know, I did the science on it, you know, and it had like 5 pieces of aquarium gravel that was in its digestive tract, and it just smoked it, you know, because those things are so delicate as they are anyways, you know, very subtle things can kill those little species. So yeah, eating aquarium gravel was not on its diet, and it really took a toll on that snake. But yeah,
I feel like that's, oh, I was going to say, like, early keeping in the hobby, I feel like kids always run into that kind of stuff. That liner you put in the bottom of like a silverware drawer, that like kind of sticky stuff. I used to have that over my heat pad some reason when I had my first or my second boa when I was like 17, and I didn't notice it actually ate it and then regurgitated it a couple days later. So like I said, early keeping, I think we do dumb shit sometimes.
Oh yeah, no, there's all kinds of stuff that you learn along the way on this journey. That's for sure. That was one for me, you know, and it impacted me, but you know, it really added to my fascination at that point in time, you know, with reptiles and amphibians. So, you know, but you know, my favorite species still to find here in Central Ohio is the eastern milk snake. I love finding them. I find lots of them here in eastern Licking County, where I'm from, and you know, it's amazing just to find those. And we got some really nice red ones, you know, here. They're not as red as some of the like Carolina eastern milk snakes and such, but you know, they're absolutely wonderful snakes to find in the wild.
They are cool. And go ahead. Well, Dave and I, we found 11 in a day by me. And the thing is, we only did a half a day, and 2 of my good spots were fucking gone. So if those are still there, I think we could have found near 20 that day. But you know, they're a very fun species to find. And that was kind of the thing we were trying to do, was like see how many milk snakes we could find. We found a bunch of other stuff too. We got like 5 black blue racer integrates that day, some ringnecks, and some garters also.
Yeah. That's interesting. I always seem to find, you know, in the same place that I find eastern milks, I always find northern ringneck snakes as well. You know, it's like they almost come hand in hand. You know, it makes me wonder that if maybe the baby milk snakes are preying on that species.
You're right. You're right, because like all the Lampropeltis, they're like lizard or snake eaters or both, and like a lot of like king snakes as babies, they eat a lot of little lizards. And in eastern milk snakes, in the middle of this range, there's like hardly any lizards. Like by me, where I'm finding them, there is no lizards. But I have found one. I've only ever found one eastern milk snake that had a decay snake in its mouth. It was swallowed all of it. You could see a tip of a decay snake. But yeah, ringneck snakes and decay snakes would be like perfect prey for them. So that's where I find them. There's a lot of decay snakes and also ringnecks. So yeah, they need to have that. They need to have that there in their diet. So yeah, I don't think you can have eastern milk snakes without at least like brown snakes to decay snakes, or also like, you know, ringnecks. But I think if you're finding a lot of decay snakes, there's probably a good chance there's ringneck snakes in that area also.
100%. Yeah, I actually had my uncle bring to me. It's probably been about 5 years ago. I told you about this, Jeff, but you know, he owns some heavy machinery and was excavating the side of this hill out in this real sandstone like rock outcropping area, and he found a mass nest from a group of eastern milk snakes. I didn't know if you knew they did that. He actually found that and brought it to me.
Communal nesting.
There were over 100 eastern milk snakes eggs in it, and they were all hatching about the time that he actually collected them. So by the time he got them over to me, like a day later, there was like 70 baby eastern milk snakes in the bottom of this bucket. It was incredible.
That's pretty cool. Any morphs?
Oh, it was real cool. Yeah.
Any morphs? Any morphs in the group of babies?
Oh no, I wish, dude. Yeah, that I definitely did look at them. I kept them. Dude, it was like maybe a week, you know, and I tried offering a couple frozen thawed pinkies just to see if one would eat, and nobody ate. And I didn't want to watch those guys just deteriorating, so I took them out in the back of my farm and let them go. And you know, I would probably say, you know, 90% of those things probably got eaten by wild animals, or if you know, something else. But something that was cool last winter, I went into my garage and I had my glasses off and I went out there to get a beer or pop or something out of the garage fridge, and I found 2 baby eastern milk snakes on the floor in my garage. So they must have laid some eggs, maybe in my rock wall outside of my house or whatnot. But they're reproducing here now, so I'm finding baby milk snakes again, which is cool.
Very cool. Yeah, Fairly Hog Parent. She has a video of a juvenile milk snake eating a ringneck.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, hey, it makes sense. You know, it's funny because all the different locations that I go and like target that species, I always see ringneck snakes in the same range. So decay snakes as well, you know, because they have the similar habitats there. Look, it's trying to track Jesus.
Yeah, I seen that. I watched that. You mentioned that earlier. Yeah, it's doing it again. Then I had one question about the mystery boxes. I have a video posted about it. Basically, you just give me an idea of what you want, and they start at $400. And the snake you get, I always promise, is worth more than what you're actually paying for. And you just give me an idea of projects you're looking for. So pretty much everybody's always been happy. I haven't had one person upset yet, and I think that's unlikely. And we got some texters and drivers here. There's always somebody texting and driving in these podcasts. We got Elise.
Don't do that.
We got Elise,
run into somebody else when you do some stuff like that.
Anthony's supposed to be in here too, texting and driving.
Hey, Junior, do you remember that breeder, I think down in Charlotte, that worked with Eastern Milk Snake Mutations?
Oh, there was that Ted Thompson.
Was it Ted? I thought it was a Dave some reason.
There was there was somebody else too. Ted Thompson was one. And he had the white-sided Eastern milk. Who knows what happened with that? That's like too bad because like that one's like, you know, unless it just wasn't her, you know, genetic, but that's like an amazing snake. But yeah, I don't know. I remember you talking about like they had like a webpage and they showed the adults and they had these like really light ones. They had like an anery and like a T-Paz, I think.
Yeah.
John knows because John was actually he follows Eastern milks a bit. I'm like real loose. I'm like basically I kind of forget to check in on it. But if anybody ever posts something with like an Eastern milk snake, I'm always very interested.
Yeah. Now I've seen a lot of different of the color mutations out there. You know, the T-positive albinos and such, and they're beautiful. Those white-sideds are amazing though. That's an amazing color mutation with that species.
Yeah, Eastern milk snakes just as a whole, they're really cool looking. Gray background. But yeah, there's too bad there's not more morphs in them.
Well, I think there's actually like 4 or 5 to be honest, because I remember that one guy again in the Carolinas. He always had like a group photo. Look, there was a hypomelanistic in there. I think an aneurystic. I remember in the picture, like you said, a T-positive albino. I don't think there's been T-negative albino in the Easterns yet. Has there been?
There hasn't. There's been a T-positive red milk too, which I mean is like pretty much just like a prettier Eastern milk and, you know, locale subspecies variant.
I feel like I just shared that on my stories on Instagram. There's this guy, I just started following him. He does some amazing work with some Lamprepeltis stuff. I was just shocked when I saw his page and came across it. I was like, where'd this guy come from?
Oh, you talking about Prismatic? You just shared one of his things, Joel?
Yeah. So, Joel Reap is the owner.
Joel Reap.
Yeah, of the snake. But this guy that has that snake on breeding loan has just some amazing projects that he's working with. I was kind of floored. It's really cool seeing some of those rare secretive species like that and just what people are doing with them for sure.
So what was the last new species you got into?
How's the hognose snake collection doing up there? Are you working on anything new? You got any exciting news for anybody? I saw the other day that you gave away a bonus Arctic Skullface or something like that in one of or I don't know if maybe somebody bought it in one of the mystery boxes or what.
Oh yeah, you seen that one? Well, basically that was Dayton, and like he's aware. That's the thing too, because we were just talking in the Discord about it, and then it was actually Albie. He said, he goes, I'm not selling any or anything, but he hasn't produced any as far as I know. But I'm like, here's the thing. I was like, they're fine to sell. Just disclose it to the fucking person. There's nothing
wrong with it. I've said the same thing. I was having the same discussion with somebody a day ago. They were like, oh, what do you think? And I said, hey, man, it's just kind of like, I'm not comparing. I'm not saying they're the same, but spider ball pythons was a cornerstone for a lot of really cool color mutations.
I was going to talk
I think the color mutation itself, Skullface, is interesting. I think it's pretty. You know, you just got to know what comes with it. You know, and that's it. You know, like you said, I would be interested to see Skullface to Skullface breedings. Though.
Oh, I think it's gonna. I think the homozygous is really messed up, man. I think it's really messed up. And the other thing is too, like, I mean, everybody will know who we're talking about. Philippe has not been honest about the project whatsoever. Even in the Facebook post, while I was in Phoenix, there was a bunch of crazy shit happening. So everybody's like trying to start some fucking debate while I'm on fucking basically Reptile Expo traveling, like, you know, fucking my friend's getting surgery, and we're also doing like basically vacation. So anyway, somebody started in the Facebook group, and they were anonymous, like, I heard a rumor that Skullface has like an issue or something like that. And so then I came out and I'm like, listen, I was like, it's like all these rumors had to have started. They're all started from me because I've been talking about it since like day one. Nobody else has. And then the interesting thing is, like, I mean, we're kind of jumping around. Well, let me just finish. And people were tagging Philippe, and a couple of people were like, you know, you're going to not see him anywhere close to this conversation. Then Philippe did come out and say, like, yeah, this year I noticed it. Basically, he just decided to disclose and say that he noticed it like 2 days ago.
Right.
Like after, like, I'm like, oh, so I noticed it like immediately, but it took you like 4 years and like 500 babies produced plus. But, you know, the thing is, though, I mean, something similar happens like the spider ball python and the Enigma leopard gecko. The Enigma leopard gecko was not disclosed. Everybody had to find out when they bred their stuff, and all started talking amongst each other. Hey, my Enigmas are spinning in circles, and somebody else is like, hey, mine's doing the same fucking thing. And then spider ball pythons, like, I think when Kevin was first selling them, they're like 25 grand each, and females only. And then Dave, since he's in the ball python community, Dave's actually shared some very interesting information that was like new to me. And John, I think we talked about this maybe a little bit. And this was interesting. Somebody had x-rays done of spider ball python.
Yes.
The physiology, their structure and their skull, the inner ear bone, probably the quadrant bone or that area is like dimpled. And that's what's affecting, because the thing is, like, people think of like snakes as not having ears. They essentially do though. They do. They just don't have, you know, an opening. They have, you know, they basically, it's kind of like Beethoven. He is deaf, but he bit onto this thing to play the piano, and through his jawbone he could hear really well. So that's why people's like, well, how did you know how to compose? You know, he's like, is he just that good at memorizing notes? And it's like, maybe a little bit, but no, a lot of this, he may have even been better because of that, because he's more in tune to it, because now he's actually feeling it radiating through his skull. And I'd imagine, you know, snakes, their mode of hearing is very similar, and they can actually hear a lot of like decibels. Like a snake can actually hear your voice. And, you know, so the Skullface, I'm thinking, have a very similar, you know, structural issue as spider ball python. And I actually have some, like, I think very, you know, supportive evidence, because I hatched out twin Skullface. And as you know, John, twins, especially hognoses, they usually have little underdeveloped domed heads. And they have the worst neurological effects out of all of them. And they happen to have odd-shaped heads because of them being runts. So that supports, I'm like, I bet it's the same as the spider ball python. They have their inner ear bone, part of their skull right there is probably a little, like, irregular. And then that makes the effect of it in certain ones more substantial or not. And it's something that you most likely are not going to be able to get rid of. But I do have Skullface. I have quite a few of them that don't have any neurological effects, no equilibrium issues. They're just normal. And so the one that Dayton got in the mystery box, because he really wanted one. And actually, I thought the mystery box was less. And then he's like, well, actually, I paid this much because I had 2 snakes in there. And I was going to give him the choice. And he goes, well, I actually wanted to up it. And I was like, I was like, well, those are, I was like, you know what? Have both of them. Let me know. And he really wanted a Skullface. And so he's seen it. He was really happy with it. So
that's perfect. No, that's great, man, Dave. That's enlightening to hear that about the spider ball pythons, though. I mean, that's such great data, you know, to really look into. Because you know, we talk about these things, and I'm sure you've talked about it as well with a lot of people. You know, you've been around Jeff for a long time, Dave. I think the first time I met you was, Jeff, I was at your mom and dad's house, or your mom's house up there. Shoot, it's been 8 years ago, maybe 9 years
10.
ago, I think. Yeah, up there. Yeah, it was.
Not that long ago. Dave's always saying it's like 10, 12 years. It wasn't that long, Dave.
I turned 30 years old and moved in with you. I turned 40. I know.
we need to get some hognose snakes. Who could we get that to? Somebody would do that. It would be interesting data just to look at that, because all of these color mutations, we can find in these other species, whether it's piebald with ball pythons. There's a hognose snake carrying that in its gene sequence somewhere. We just have to find it and unlock it. So it's interesting with that gene in particular, how it's acting with that. I would like to see that with maybe an extreme version of the Skullface, and then versus maybe one that isn't showing any any problems. So there would be multiple data set points from a normal hognose snake, maybe a wild type, even a wild caught would be the best, and then maybe a captive one, and then those ones, just to see where the change is in that, and why is it acting like that and moving its head around. It would, because I know when I first saw them at your house, Jeff, it was a couple of years ago when I first saw this.
Yeah, I showed you, because I was like, some of them are like vaguely neurological, and I showed them to you, and I was like, they're all acting normal, and it was like about 5 minutes, and then the one kind of went like this a bit. I was like, there it is. You've seen it.
Yeah, I remember that. And I actually saw another one do it. I remember this specifically, and I said, oh, look, this one's doing it too. And you're like, man, that one ain't never done that before yet.
Yeah, the Arctics and the normals seem to be mostly okay. It's very like rare. But yeah, the funny thing is, like, I wanted to do the same thing, because after Dave was talking about the spider ball python, what you're talking about, John, X-ray the ones that aren't having any issues, the ones that are having issues. Here's the one thing, though. I think I got to raise them to adults or close to it, because they're 100%. So fucking small. It's not going to work until they're adults.
No, it wouldn't work until they're adults. And, you would want to have a nice, big, broad head to be able to look at, to really identify all those, instead of, I don't know what the size of a baby hognose snake head is. What, maybe a centimeter? Maybe
it's like a pea. It's like a pea. Like a nice size pea.
Yeah.
So that's what I do want to do. That's an interesting one. And then Dave, like, the funny thing is, like, how many ball pythons have neurological issues? Because, like, you're telling me spot nose has it, but it's very mild, which I was actually surprised. I wasn't aware for a long time that spot nose even had an issue. But then you told me the power balls, they kind of have a little bit of a wobble, but very, very mild.
Yeah.
So there's the what they call the wobble complex in ball pythons, a bunch of different genes on the same allele. Champagne, hidden gene woma, spot nose, spider. I think chocolate, blackhead, and a few other genes like sable fit in there. But there are, it seems like most of the ones that have a wobble are on the same allele.
Interesting. So that's funny that they're mutants of the same allele, and they have varying degrees of this expressivity. Has anybody x-rayed these spot nose and champagnes? But spot nose and champagne, I feel like, because I've had a few of champagnes, and they never had any issues.
No, a lot of times it's when you start comboing them out, when you make a mistake and put them with something else on the wobble complex. I have a champagne spot nose that been produced, and it wobbles really bad. Like one of those old school spiders that kind of helicopter. That animal does that. But most combinations are okay until, again, you accidentally end up on the same allele.
I see. So, yeah, because basically then with the champagne and a spot nose, you have the two mutants of the same allele on the same loci. So now they're kind of completing it, and you're getting that, reactivity of that issue.
That was actually one of the funny things about the start of this conversation, because I think about all these times we put these wobbly genes together in other species and make more retarded animals. And he started out with asking if we're going to breed some Skullface together. Sounds like the worst idea in the entire world.
Well, he already knows it's a bad idea. John knows it's a bad idea.
Terrible idea, but I would like to see, because they've done this spider, and doesn't it make like this white snake that's just doesn't even hatch? It's just dead inside the egg.
Yeah, it's really awful. Maybe the Skullface will come out like inside out, and we can all take pictures of it.
Yeah, there we go. And then so Joshua had a good one, and John, we actually started talking about this, and then we sidestepped. What do you think the future of hoggos looks like? Morph combos or specific line bred traits? And John, you were asking me about new projects and such as that. So we could get into that conversation. There's the one that we could talk about for 10 minutes or 10 hours, depending.
Yeah. Oh man, dude. I mean, I don't know what, I know a little bit of inside of what you're working up there with, Jeff. We talk about what what we're working on. But
yeah, one problem is you haven't been here in a year, so you know how fast things change in a year.
yeah, everything changed. Same. Hey, yeah, but right back at you. I know I've tried to take you out to dinner at least once, and
I pulled a Mitch on you. I couldn't show up.
Yeah, you didn't show up. Look at that. Yeah. But yeah, for me, what am I working on? So this year I focused on a couple things. I wanted to get the Arctic Sable Lavender Toffee project going. So I focused on that one quite a bit. I focused on outcrossing Sable Lav stuff into stronger animals to make more diverse lines to bring back together. I worked on red stuff this year for me. Because there's not a lot, I'll hatch out a real red. You know how it is with polygenics, Jeff. You hatch out, especially with something like red or purple or lemon ghost or whatever you want to work with it. You hatch something out, you keep the best ones, and you breed them. So after 3 or 4 generations, you do that. You start getting really red animals, really yellow animals, and things along those lines. So. For me this year, it was my own red line of things. I've got red lines of Sunburst, red lines of Mai Tais, red lines of regular albino and Arctic that I'm working with, and trying to improve that on my side of things, and lemon ghost as well. I did have these weird snakes pop out of my lemon ghosts this year.
I've seen those.
Those are I shared a couple of them with you, Jeff. They're an interesting little project. I've seen some other people with similar animals. There's one other big hognose breeder that has one that almost looked identical that came from storm cloud stuff, which was really cool. But it was just nice. And that was months ago when I seen that. When I first hatched them and shared them, they reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm hatching these weird things too. Are they from storm clouds? I said, not storm clouds, but sables. So yeah. It made a little bit of sense. I don't know if there's any connection there with the gene, but those were cool. And then I got, my red dragon thing that I hatched out a couple of years ago. It's me and Jeff, I think we both are come to a consensus on it's a cinnamon type animal.
Yeah.
It's interesting though. It's an albino, and it hatched out of a really weird clutch, just albino Arctic times albino Conda, and just trying to make just really cool animals. And I had this weird one pop out. So this last year I did breed it to an Arctic double het coral, mostly because I wanted to see how Arctic interacted with it, if there is something weird going on with it, and just to already have that gene present, but also having a het albino animal, especially one from my coral stuff that I've worked on that lavender gene now for like 7-8 years, outcrossing it to try and make it as strong as possible inside of my breeding program. And I bred it to it. And that female laid the first 2 eggs. They were perfect coming out. She had like 10 left in her. I was real excited. Came back to see her swallow her last one down. And so, there's always next year on that project. I wasn't really honestly upset about it. It's, I know some people would really ruin their year or whatnot, but I still have the male, he's doing great. He eats every time for me. So there's always this coming year to try and prove that one out and just see how it works. I'm not even really trying to prove anything out. Like, I just want to see if it's something that can be replicated. That's
it's a cinnamon. It's going to replicate. The funny thing is, I now have 2 separate cinnamons that popped up in my collection. I had a new one this year, completely unrelated. So I got another cinnamon. I have my LG cinnamon, and then I have a cinnamon that I got from the UK. So and they keep popping up. It's a very peculiar trait, and it's very interesting. And your lemon ghost sables, I'd like to see them now that they're a little older. I have one that's not a sable. It's a lemon ghost. It's actually a pure LG, and he has like pretty much all missing head pattern, and he's very interesting. Look, I call him Lemon Head. I'll show you a picture of him, and you can see like I think it might be a similar, phenotype as yours. So it might be there's a really weird polyvariant.
Let me get out this one right here. It's growing up pretty well.
Oh, yeah,
is my camera quality good to be able to see?
It's pretty good. Yeah, I think we can see.
Okay, cool. I'll get this one out. Here's one of them. They got really yellow, Jeff. Really yellow.
They looked very yellow. Okay. Yeah, it's got that I'm surprised you didn't call it a woodruff, but that actually looks better. It actually looks pretty interesting because of the speckling in the background too.
Yeah,
that's weird.
It's got the real washed out belly to it. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Typical. That original. All of my Lemon Ghost stuff has originated from Jeff, guys. If anyone ever questions that, I guess. Maybe they. There's always speculation everywhere of where people get things, but. All my original Lemon Ghost stuff came from Jeff, and all of my stuff has black bellies, where a lot of your stuff has the more like hypo-ish belly, it seems like.
Well, some do. Yeah, you got one of my really nice pure Lemon Ghost females a million years ago. I think I was like 30 or 31 when he got that. I think I was like 30. Yeah. I may have been 29. But yeah, some of the best Lemon Ghosts have like the really black bellies. Actually, I have ones with the black belly, then the black yellow shattering, and then some are like almost all yellow bellies. I have some like solid yellow belly ones. And then Joshua, he's like, what do you think the future of the hognose looks like? Morph combos, specific line bred traits. So the one thing we're talking about is Lemon Ghost. John's got his red projects. You have the red toffee stuff, which is funny. I have really similar red toffee stuff, and that originates from. We got ours kind of similar, sources. Dan Eby, and he had the RB like kind of line toffee condas, or what they call like vanilla cherry, toffee bellies combined. And as we're breeding those back, we're seeing that it amplifies pretty quick into toffee bellies. That RB.
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Oh man, it really does. Like I've got some that are just smoking red, man, and just improving that. You pull it back, and you just try to improve that as things go on. But man. I've been real happy with how those Mai Tais turned out. Some of these sunbursts are just getting incredible. I've got one female from my F1 line. Let me see if I can. You can see her here. There it goes. But she's turning nice and red. That's camera's washing her out a little bit.
Big blocky pattern. No, I know the camera sometimes screw shit up.
And then let me see if I can. Here's some of my F2s from that line as well. They're starting to get nice.
Yeah, that's a lot more red.
But they're really starting. They're not color blast status yet, but with that just being a single albino gene instead of something real crazy, that's what's interesting there. But some of them are getting there to where it's on that color blast level with the color saturation. They're just not as diverse as yours yet. So
yeah. Looks like I have some color blast competition coming in.
Oh yeah, I'm always working on something over here, Jeff. Shit, I have fun. I have fun with this. I think that's where a lot of people, make a mistake. They look at success as, how much money you can make. And, I've set that down a while ago, and it's not what I focus on now. I just do what makes me happy. It's one of the reasons, I've been doing this a long time. You've made a lot of really cool snakes, Jeff. I've made a lot of really cool snakes. Something that people ask me for every year are snows. And, they just think it's hilarious when I tell them I've made one snow in my life. That's it. And it's funny to me that
John's doing it just to spite people now at this
point.
With
leucistics. You know how I feel about leucistics, Jeff. I don't have a lot of them. Well, I got adults and everything. I just don't breed them. I look at them, I feed them. I have the color mutation itself, but it's not something. I'm not a fan of solid white snakes. I like something with depth to it. Color, contrasting, pattern. I've never been a big fan of super conda stuff. Besides it being a genetic powerhouse to be able to pass on the genes.
Sure, yeah.
There, it's the fast track to making 100% clutches. But I like patterns, so it's not something. I was always before when I'd make super condas, I just they would be the first ones that I would sell. And be like, I don't even want them. But now I've got some stuff in my breeding program that I use. Like I've got super sunbursts that I use as cornerstones for stuff for furthering projects, and super conda sables that are for storm cloud that are I've been real. That was one of my favorite snakes I hatched this year. Actually, now that I say that I hate super condas so much, as I produced that Arctic super conda storm cloud. And you know, he's just a beautiful snake. He almost looks like he has, I think, you know, what somebody call it, like the shatter gene or some craziness or something. So they called it something on one of my Instagram posts, but it's just chainmail. That's what they call it.
Okay.
And just the way it looks, how that black flecking's trying to come up from in between the scales and everything like that. It's an amazing snake. So
yeah, no, that's gorgeous. And I think you're like the only person with that.
yeah, maybe, I don't know.
I think you're the only person with that.
I might be. I got a couple of them that I made this year, but there's one that's just, you know, whip it out and put it on cam. Oh,
can he whip out that LG Sable thing? Well, he just did, but that was that's for like 2 minutes ago. I think Reps in Texas just wants to say that. Jeff, John, are y'all working with any green polys like grass green? The LG Sable stuff's like our probably our closest shot to get ultra green. I don't think there's really any combo unless up to new surfaces that's going to allow us to make anything more green than like a high percent LG Sable. I think that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I made some really nice LG Sables this year that are nice, and they got some real nice color to them. I was kind of surprised how they look, Jeff. I was disappointed at first. I thought they looked good, you know, nice army green, you know, with like the yellows trying to pull through and stuff. But as they got bigger, I was like, oh, okay, I can mess with these.
Yeah.
They're real pretty animals. So let's see what else. I've got a couple more of these LGs from that line that turned out kind of wacky too. Let me see if I can.
That's pretty. Yeah, it's very pretty.
So see how it's got that weird like head pattern thing going on with it too?
Yeah, it's reduced right in the center.
Yeah. So it's, you know, I got a few more from that line that are pretty cool.
We got a super Arctic.
See what it really looks like in person instead of like the camera does no justice with those things. And here's this little boy that everyone was.
Oh, yeah, you can see that. I see what they mean about that chainmail.
Yeah, it's
I like that.
And then the super Arctic permafrost, I made one of those too. It was
that's what he Anthony Riccardi just asked. He just showed for the super. Yeah, he just asked for you to show the super.
Arctic. I'll whip that one out for someone to see. You know, it's a pretty cool snake too.
That's gorgeous. That's really cool. Look at that one, Dave.
I can't see anything with these sunglasses on.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Too cool for school.
Sorry, I missed out on the whole experience. Yeah, real shame. Real shame.
That's a pretty neat snake. It's got a real nice blue background to it. I really like the head pattern. Let me see if I can get a close-up of its head here. You know, yeah, kind of. Try to get out of my light here a little bit. But, you know, yeah, it's a pretty rad little snake, man.
That is a good combo. That is probably one of the top combos for sure. Can't disagree with that. That looks very good. And I like how grainy.
Fast too, and you know, it is how it is.
Dave took his glasses off. It was nice enough for Dave to take his glasses off for. It's kind of monsoonish looking, you know, for a ball python. I'm trying to translate it to Dave because Dave doesn't know what he's looking at.
Yeah, talk to me like I'm blind, buddy. Just describe it to me.
It looks like a Mojave monsoon with more pattern.
More pattern than a monsoon.
Well, more like you can see the saddles. So it's like, you know, because a monsoon is straight shattered. So, you know, that animal, there's, of course, the saddles of the shattering, and then you got the background pigment. It's a very interesting looking snake. So
I got a question. It kind of takes us back to Skullface for a second because I've had this conversation like twice. So when we talked to Ben Russo, we were talking about deformities and projects, which keeps people away from investing. And then palmetto corn snakes came up because he's heavily invested in palmettos, something that he overlooked, even though he had the eye issues. And I think we were talking to Nick Mutton about it the other day too. And like carpet pythons have the jag gene that's wobbly, but very impressive. Like you said, enigmas. We forgot a couple other species too. There's some other good wobble traits out there. But my question is this. Why are you willing to work with genes like that? Is it because there's not a lot in the community to work with yet for hognose? So you guys will take a chance with that wobbly one? The same reason, because it makes nice looking mutations? I'm not hating on it, but same thing with Enigma. Enigma was wobbly, but it made some of the coolest leopard geckos for about 5 years.
It did. Well, with the Enigma leopard gecko, it was the same as the spider ball python, same as the Skullface. You bought them, and then you were surprised later. It's kind of like sleeping with somebody, and they don't inform you that they have an STD, and you find out later. So you can't blame me. This guy is like, not disclosing it. So, I think I'm safe. And then you wake up, and then you start feeling itchy. And so anyway, with the Enigma, like my dad and I, we bought those, and it was like $2,500 each. And we got 2 ready to breed Enigma females. So $2,500 each. That was like, back when I was like 17 or 18. So that's like back then, as 20 years ago, that's equivalent to like $90,000 basically. And so, not really. But anyway, the one female my dad and I watched when she was gravid, like she didn't like wobble or anything, but she like pranced when she had like walk or like run. She like pranced. We're like, well, that's kind of weird. And I think like prances. I was like, this female's like kind of cool. I was like, she's cute. I was like, she kind of like does this weird prance when she runs. And then you start hatching out the babies. And then everybody starts talking on gecko forums like, hey, my Enigmas are coming out messed up. And then like, then the originator or the person that was releasing the project wasn't saying anything about it until everybody else is like, hey, these things are all neurological. And they're like, by the way, yes, they are. But, Dave, that was earlier in the community. And same with spider ball pythons. Like people found out and they were like, oh, why don't you tell us? But then they were like, just continued breeding them. Now I feel like ethics and standards and, everything like that has risen a lot and people are just a little more aware. Like 20 years ago, like I'll even like admit to it, like, we bred these things and we thought it was like, fine until we started seeing some babies that were so bad that they weren't even able to thrive. And so then it was like, 4 years into breeding them, we kind of terminated the whole project. And then you had those people that are saying my Enigmas don't spin or I'm going to try to outcross it. It's like the same with the spider and like the Skullface. Like people are like, well, maybe we need to outcross them. I was like, dude, these are dominant and they're getting bred to unrelated shit nonstop. It's like you can't. These are already insanely outcrossed. But Enigmas, and it's funny you're saying this too, Dave. Like the Enigmas definitely seem to be exacerbated when you had multiple genes like mounted in there. Like if you had them like a super snow or anything that was like a little bit of like a weaker gene, it made them worse. So now, if the spider came out nowadays, there would be a lot different sentiment about it. Because for the longest time, people bred spider ball pythons like they bred the bejesus out of them. Like they were everywhere. Yeah, you guys all remember, and like they were like a pinnacle of really cool ball python morph combinations that everybody wanted to invest into for a very long time. And Enigmas too for a little bit until Enigmas like they started getting so bad where people were like, hey, there's a small percent. Their quality of life is like non-existent, and you're essentially breeding animals where a small percent are going to be so severe they're not even going to be able to really survive on their own. And so then that's like people started really questioning the whole morals and ethics behind it. And then we would even talk like, yeah, I have this super galaxy Enigma I made, and no matter how much we focus on it and try to cater to it, this thing won't grow. It's really small, doesn't do well. Now Skullface isn't as bad. Nowhere near as bad as Enigma. It's nowhere near as bad as spider ball python. And the whole reason I bred Skullface, of course, is because initially when I got him, I wasn't told there was anything wrong with them. But when I got him, obviously I could tell there was an issue. But it's somewhat minor. And from that breeder, there was definitely people talking about like they'd get frosted or some other stuff that had neuro issues. So I'm like, well, I don't want to scrap this whole project right away. And then I turn out to be wrong. Let me breed these in my quarantine section to animals that I have that are from my projects, see what kind of outcomes I get. Although I was already like 99.9% sure, I'd pretty much bet my life. I was like, I bet these are going to come out neurological. And, they did. The one thing, though, is that, and Philippe said it, and he actually is accurate with this one. And he's like being like kind of honest. It's actually kind of mind blowing. I really don't like agreeing with him because I'm like, I have to question it because I was like, well, he lies so much. But I guess this time he didn't lie. But I guess you can't just lie all the time. But yeah, the frosted and the caramel Skullface do seem to be worse than my Arctic and just super Arctic Skullface. It seems like the caramel frosted stuff seems to make it a little worse for whatever reason. But now the one thing is, Dave, I don't know if I'm going to continue breeding Skullface. It's one I'm like really on the fence because they really aren't anywhere as bad as a spider ball python, but I do get these ones that kind of wave and wobble a little bit, but I wouldn't say their quality of life is bad. And again, they're not as bad as like a spider or enigma. I'd say they're probably more like maybe, I don't know what to compare them to. I'd have to see maybe like the spot nose one that has a little bit of wobble. Maybe they're like that. And do you have something to say, Dave?
Well, what I was going to say was kind of what you were getting at right there. It seems like every community seems to have, we'll call it a wobble animal. And, you know, another one I forgot about was the scoria boa in boa constrictors. I think there's a willingness within a community to breed these for X amount of time, and then they jump ship on them. They do fetch a high price for a while until eventually the community again turns its back. So Skullface, you know, it might do like a peak and then it might just drop off someday. And then in 15, 20 years, it might be a gene that people are trying to get out of their collections. But I think that's the progression that happens with this kind of stuff.
No, it's interesting that you say that, Dave, for sure. But one thing I gotta, commend Jeff on is he's been honest about this from the get-go. I know you brought it up to me, a couple years ago as well, Jeff, that you had this assumption on them, but wanted to know first. And looking from a micro in the herpetoculture environment, we had the issue with pink pastel.
Yes.
For years, and it was something where there was a neurological issue that was bred out of pink pastel. I know every single pink pastel that I have inside of my collection, I've never seen a neurological issue with any of them. Never, so looking at it from the micro side, but Dave, just like what you said, from the macro side of things, as the entire community, we have these genes that are in all these animals, and people are now trying to remove them from their gene pool instead of keeping them around. So it's interesting that you said that, and then you gotta wonder at one point, I'm not saying like a victim there, but it should have been known a little bit earlier.
So the hard thing too with this is all these genes always make really nice combos. So all this Skullface stuff is going to be amazing, which is going to keep you guys coming back for more. Yeah. No, I don't think people will jump ship right away.
There, it took Jeff, probably investing gross amounts of money for him to understand this. And, but you gotta learn at one point, whether it was Jeff, whether it was me, whether it was, any or someone else that, invested in a gene like this, you don't know until you know. And now you know it. So.
Well, and this might be the wrong way of looking at it, but all these other genes we talked about, all the people invested in those projects early all made money. And even palmetto corn snakes, when people know about the eye issue they didn't know at first, will still invest big money in scales palmetto corn snakes. So like I said, I think these run a shelf life, just it depends on the quality of the morph. People are willing to turn a blind eye.
What was Vin's prognosis with the palmetto? Because he is kind of like...
It wasn't... I wouldn't say it was a prognosis. It was more of an acceptance. How about that? I didn't think it was. There's an understanding that comes with that problem, but yeah.
What's his philosophy on breeding them then? Is he still breeding them? Because I know he's with his boas. He's very, particular on, characteristics and the whole anatomy.
No, 100%. And the only reason this one,
so it's like it's like a sub. to the boas.
I think what that conversation was is we were talking about things to stay away from, and then I just thought it was kind of comical that some people work with palmettos even though we know about there being issues. So that's kind of where that conversation went. Wasn't so much like digging into why you should or shouldn't work with palmettos. It was an understanding there's a problem with the project, but people are still willing to invest money into it. They overlook the problem because again they like the animals enough to overlook it. And that was kind of where that conversation was going.
Right. Yeah, because that's what you said. What, the morphs, you're even you're proposing that.
And
what are we willing to overlook to make the cool morph combinations we want?
Do either of you guys follow Don Patterson?
Name sounds familiar.
It was corn snakes?
No, he's a Canadian breeder. But the reason I bring him up is, do you remember? I'm going to bring up the pictures. We talked about this, but he did like, it was a hybrid. It was like a Jag to like a Stonewash Brettles. And he just made the coolest carpet pythons in the entire world. But the purists don't want to look at it, but I hate to say it, the most beautiful one ever. You guys talk. I'm going to find the picture. I'm not even here right now.
No, I can agree with that one. I also, Dave, am a purist. I don't know if there's a lot of people out there.
I think you can be both. You can be both.
That's one of the next things I probably want to conquer with hognose snakes is actually do locality.
Interesting.
And just from the purist standpoint, because there is a huge difference, and I know you've seen this, Jeff, as well, especially with the original Sable stuff. There's a huge difference in those snakes versus like some lavenders or some Texas animals. Big difference. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge difference. I mean, I was getting hatch times that were 7 days apart.
Yes.
On those original northern locality of Sable animals. I mean, it's all been blended at this point where there's pretty much a standard. I mean, my entire collection may hatch 2 days earlier than a lot of people just because I have so much. I mean, I based, foundations in my collection on the Sable gene. So, it's interesting how just those locales and, they blended them all. They used to be Dusky, the Plains, and was there a third? There's
never a third. What it was
Gloidii or whatnot.
Well, it's Gloidii. That's the Dusty. Gloidi's the Dusty. Mm-hmm. And so they originally, they were like they're called them all Westerns, and then they discerned that there was Mexican, and then for whatever reason they had Dusty, and then which was the Gloidii, and then they had just Nassicus. And Gloidii was basically somebody just wanted to put their name on some discovery that didn't even fucking exist.
Right. No, but I think there is some locality traits that are there.
Oh, there is. There is.
Just like I said, you look at the Texas locale versus even southern Canada, in the southernmost points where they go up into the Canadian range, they are drastically different. I mean, the northern locales, I mean, it's not surprising that Sable was floating around in that gene pool up there. Just like the eastern garter snakes up by the lake. We have the black color mutation of the eastern garter snakes up there by the lake. It's probably an evolutionary adaptation that will help that species live. Think of a solid black hognose snake in an area where they're probably brumating 5 to 6 months out of the year. That black color mutation is going to give them that extra week at the beginning and at the end of the year just to be able to survive. So
yeah. I've talked about that, about the leopard boa, the Mexican Sonoran boa. Like, I always wonder if that mutation was one of those possible mutations that could become dominant in the wild because the animals thrive better because that darker pigment gave them a chance to absorb more heat.
Yeah.
That leopard boa, that's a trait that's from like more montane locale, isn't it? It's from like a more isn't that like
Sonoran stigma?
Sonoran, okay.
Yeah.
I love boas.
And we were talking.
They used to be my ones right there.
John used to do
boa constrictors.
Yeah, I'm still pretty hooked on boas.
I just used to keep a lot of boa constrictors.
Yeah, so Pale Scale, she's like, Jeff, can you talk about that red line you asked me about that Vin Russo had back in the day, the ones you asked me before that were super red? We talked about those one time. Basically, is like a red lineage that Vin Russo had that I'd really like to know where he got the original ones from. And Pale Scales actually asked Vin, and Vin's like, I don't remember. That's too long ago. But I remember seeing him. He had him at Daytona back in 2002. I said 2003, I think, last time, but it was actually 2002 because I remember I was 15. And so that would have been 2002. And anyway, Dan Evie had some really nice reds from him. And those reds kind of got floated around. And I don't know where that lineage started from. It probably started from Richard Evans, probably from breeding those. They had the red phase, actually the Dusties, Gloidii, and they had these real big, nice red wobbly pattern. They had this really cool wobbly pattern blotches, and the sails were really nice, kind of like cherryish red. And those got all mixed around, and I think that's where like a lot of other people's red lineages started from. Like Raging Red maybe even started from that because like Ted Williams picked up those reds, and then Dave actually knows Ted Williams, and that's actually where the Raging Red started from was these reds that came from Ted Williams, and Ted Williams got these red phase from North Carolina. So it's really hard to keep track of where all these reds started or where they came from. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And the whole thing, Pale Scales, is like I wanted the information from like Vin, so he could like, hey, where'd those start from? So then we'd have some like information. But Vin was like, yeah, it's too long ago, I can't remember. So the information's kind of lost.
No, I mean, you know, that's a tough thing about that, you know. And speaking on Richard Evans, man, talk about a guy.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, he laid a lot of brickwork for, you know, the stuff that we're doing right now.
He sure did.
And, you know, I've talked with you about it, Jeff. You know, just getting that information back out there for the people, because I mean, I'd love to hear the story about, you know, behind some of that stuff. You know, I want to say that I read somewhere about one being found on a golf course, one of the T positive albinos that he worked with. I can't remember if it was the hypo or if it was, or it might even been a T negative. Not sure, but it was on a golf course somewhere. And I want to say that he got his hands on it, and that was the cornerstone for a lot of the stuff. So, yeah,
the albino, somebody found it. I don't know where they found it. And then he got in a trade. The pink pastel, I don't even want to say because I always mess it up a little bit and somebody critiques me. Or the only person I actually know that seems to know that story is Kevin Rhodes and then Richard Evans. I'd like to ask Richard Evans directly. And then the hypo he hatched out from wild-caught female eggs that he had collected or had accumulated from other people finding gravid females, let them lay their eggs, and he hatched out a hypo. And then that hypo project later gave rise to the caramel/frosted stuff. So, yeah, yep. Richard Evans got so many hognoses into the market. A lot of my first hognose came from probably Richard Evans, indirectly, not even knowing about it. Norm Dam used to get a bunch of hognoses from Richard Evans. He'd get them for like $15 each. And that I tell you about this. Norm said he'd send them in like Pringles cans and old ice cream containers. He goes, man, you'd open up the ice cream container. He goes, some of the babies, they'd still be in their head, they're still in their eggs. They're just pipping. He's like, man, you just send them like this and whatever the hell. And like, you know, they'd send them in the post office. And, you know, that was like in the like mid 90s. And so the funny thing is, like, the way they ship stuff, actually, I talked about it at Reptile Talks. It's like, yes, same, John. I was like, the whole origin of the whole entire hognose community started with Richard Evans. Without Richard Evans, like, the very first hognose I fell in love with and seen was an adult wild-caught female. And there's a good chance that was collected and sold by Richard Evans or somebody that was collecting and selling stuff to Richard Evans. So if it wasn't for Richard Evans, man, the hognose community would definitely not be where it's at. Who knows where it would be at? I don't know where it'd be at. It would be a lot more minimal. Without Richard Evans is the, you know, individual person that launched the whole community, and it was his vision of them being a good pet snake, and then him also living in Lubbock, Texas. So, you know, it's funny how like all these like really small micro things and events can lead to something really big. If it wasn't for Richard Evans, this one person liking snakes, pet shops, these people finding an albino hognose and bringing it into them. And, you know, what are the chances of that person finding an albino hognose? It could have been like Dan Eby. It could have just been the person needing to piss, and that's how they found it.
Right.
And so, yeah, one simple thing is like drinking too much Gatorade could lead to a hognose community.
Oh, wow.
So has there ever been another albino found since the original?
Well, yeah, kind of like they have the pink pastels. You know, that was found shortly after. You know, the hypo gave rise to caramel, which is like, you know, we'll just consider these like T positive. You know, and then we have the lavender, which is like kind of like a form of T positive.
Yep.
Well, that's a lot of different albinos. Have they ever found another original like T negative? Like, has there been multiple T negatives found?
One T negative found.
No, hey Jeff, I'm gonna correct you. I actually heard something this last year that one was found.
The planes, a T neg.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you sure it wasn't somebody's pet that they let go?
Collection currently. That yeah, it's not in mine. Not in mine. But yeah, I did hear a little rumbling about a new.
Where was it found?
But it looks identical from what I understand to the other T negatives. Yeah. So I bet it's going to be a compatible gene.
Yeah. Where was it found? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Because the one thing is like,
I was told Kansas, but I don't have any. It's all hearsay at that point of where I don't know the person that found it. So
yeah, if it was from Kansas, it'd be a completely new locality of albino. It'd be disjunct from the original, because the thing is, like, I guarantee there's more albinos in the wild, because that albino they found in the wild was an adult, and that albino didn't come from nothing. It came from 2 hets breeding in the wild. So generally, like, let's say you find like Richard Evans hatched that hypo from that wild caught female. That means one of those females was het hypo and a het hypo bredder. And that's one other thing I talk about too, is like, once a gene pops up and first with the recessive, the mutant isn't popping up first. Well, it is, but it's popping up in one copy. It's popping up as a heterozygous. If that heterozygous survives and it breeds and there's multiples produced and then those grow up and reproduce, there can be a bunch of hets running around. That's how Dan Eby found 2 in the same area, put them together, bred them, and produce sables. So a lot of these, like that albino hognose where it was found, there's definitely more hets, and there's definitely probably more visual albinos in that area. And those albinos might have existed in this small locale for thousands of years, and it just keeps getting passed on here and there. So that's the one.
It says a lot on how much they move as well, Jeff. When a clutch of hognose snakes hatches, there's Snake Discovery has a new albino line. Okay,
but I'm pretty sure it's just a pet snake they found. Yeah. So that's
that could probably happen as well. I know people find albino corn snakes around facilities as well, but that's possible there. I haven't heard of that one.
We got a question here too. John, what made you get out of boas and into other snakes?
All right, I had kids. I used to keep all the big stuff. I had big BCC boas. I had the true red tails. I had green anacondas. I had some venomous species when we were allowed to keep venomous species here in Ohio without permits. And I had kids. Wife said, you don't have to get rid of snakes, but the stuff that can kill people and wrap around small children and squeeze them, it's time for them to go. So I couldn't just get rid of just my BCC stuff or anything. And that's one of the things that got me into hognose snakes, was that in particular. I just wanted something that was more of a challenge. I had great success with boas. I did things a little bit unorthodox, like I do everything else with breeding. I looked at what was going on outside. A lot of people back when I was breeding boas were cooling their boas. I never did that. I just manipulated light cycle. And I was getting 90 to 100% reproduction rates out of my females. It was incredible. But that was the reason that I got out of boas and the venomous stuff. And now I'm starting to trickle back into it. I know Jeff knows about my new venomous stuff that I'm working with, as he is working with the beadeds. I got into Gila monsters now, little mouse traps, as I call them. But they are an amazing species. But yeah, sorry, going on a tangent there. That's why I got rid of my boas.
Fair.
Any plans on getting boas?
What's that?
Any plans on getting boas in the future?
Oh man, hey, I would definitely get boas again. I need more space.
Right.
The current snake facility is where it's at, and I'll need to have a tropical room. Some species that I am planning on working with, though, Eastern indigo snakes. I want to get a nice group of Eastern indigo snakes and try them. I think they're a little bit more bulletproof than a lot of the other species, the larger colubrids. So it would be fun to work with those. I feel like I could be real successful just even in like a hognose snake type of environment. I don't know if I'd want to get them down to like 28 degrees for a week, but I would definitely get them nice and cool, just like the rest of them.
Yeah. I've always liked the species, but the permits, dealing with customers willing to go through the trouble, sometimes I find can be difficult.
No, I agree with that. And I don't know what type of like breeding program I'd really do. It definitely wouldn't be like the hognose snakes. It might be like 3 or 2, and breed them as I see. But that's about it. It was one of the, first species that I seen. I recently just seen some real nice ones down at West Liberty College. I went down there to visit with Zach Loafman down there. We're writing a little something, but he has some real nice Eastern Indigo snakes there on the campus, and the biggest false water cobras I've ever seen in my life. He's got a great program down there, man. I couldn't be more blown away. You go into those settings, sometimes you like go to zoos, and you're like, oh, this like world-class zoo. And, we're reptile people. So we go, check out the reptile, and, you're underwhelmed a lot, with what you see inside of those spaces. Sometimes they have good programs, but, a lot of times it's just not. And I was blown away by that school down there. If there's anyone, that is interested in pursuing a career in herpetology and working in an institution like a zoo or something like that, I did. It was something I went to college for, to Ohio State, and I looked at it from an investment and what my return would be in college, and I didn't like what my return would be after spending $80,000 to $100,000. I didn't see the point in there. That's when I started building a brand and a business here. Just with snakes, not just hognose snakes, but that's when I started thinking in that way. But that school down there is amazing, and I probably wouldn't have left school if I had a teacher like him and a program like that around me. It's just so encompassed around animal husbandry and wild conservation, and it's an amazing program down there at West Liberty. Jeff, you ought to go down and check it out, man.
Yeah, but that's the Crawdad guy.
Yep, Dr. Crawdad.
What the Dr. Crawdad? That's his like.
Go follow that dude. He has a great program that he's doing. Probably he inspires all the people that are going to walk behind us, and I think that's just amazing. So,
nice.
We have one from Liam Court. John, have you ever had an experience in breeding or keeping that had you reconsider being in the hobby, or have you kept going strong throughout your entire life?
Have I ever? No, I don't think so. I never got in this to be on the financial side of things. I've always just had a love for reptiles and amphibians. Anyone that knows me, like, if I go on vacation, my family may look at the beach on what, restaurant they want to go to. I'm looking at what road is less traveled and what snakes I can check and new species that I can find. So no, I would say if I ever scaled back in the hobby, I would be more into working with wild animals and doing data collection there, or photography of reptiles and amphibians. I would love to do that. I think it would just be amazing to check even more boxes of wild species that I have not yet encountered.
Oh, damn, man. That's one thing, like taking pictures. I figured you'd be burnt out, especially when you have so many people. Can I get a picture of this? Can I get a picture of parents? Oh, man, I don't like taking pictures anymore, I don't think.
That's one thing I suck at, honestly, is pictures. I've gotten better over the years. I like, I got me a nice camera now, and I got me this new little thing right here. I'm going to start, doing some filming on. I really like the quality of the picture that this little thing does, and then just being able to track me. If I want to like teach people about how I clean out cages. I can give a real nice tutorial on how I clean cages. And every step along the way. And so that's something I'm going to be focusing on more moving forward, is just education, not just around hognose snakes, but just captive husbandry in a commercial setting, and then how you can weigh that on, somebody that wants to keep a pet hognose snake and what they can do there. I think, there's two different sides there. And, I think, sometimes it gets lost there. Everyone expects, us as, reptile breeders to keep everything in a 40-gallon long, as far as a female hognose snake goes at minimum. And, sometimes it's not feasible, and sometimes the animals themselves don't thrive as well in that type of environment versus a very controlled and lab type setting where everything can be consistent and clean and the same, and it just makes it easier for the husbandry aspect to be able to produce some of these animals.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with smaller containers as long as you maintain them.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, agreed. I know with me, I'm a little bit overboard. You know, we mop ourselves out of our rooms every day when we're working inside of here. Like I'm a tyrant on that. I know, you know, AJ, my employee, sometimes I'm sure he's like, damn, dude, like you're fucking hyper fixated on everything. But I am, you know, I'm always looking to improve in different spaces. I'm looking, you know, CI for me from an operations standpoint is just, you know, it's very important. I want to always improve, and I'm going to look for things to make our job not only easier, but better for the animals. And, you know, that's important to me. So cleanliness inside of here, I mean, we're flipping, you know, I don't know how many individual animals are in my baby room right now. I'd say probably about 700 to 800 or so. And every single snake cage in here gets cleaned at least once a week, and it gets through a full flip. Jeff, you know how I do things. You know, I flip everything. I got multiples of all the tubs. You know, on top of my racks up there, there's FB5s, and then over here I've got, you know, the half quarts over there in the corner. But everything gets flipped at least once a week, and then sanitized through dishwashers.
Yeah.
You know, I do, you know, a step in between there where we take them outside and dump them and actually spray them out with a hose and everything like that. But, you know, the latter part of it, everything gets thrown through dishwashers and sanitized and sterilized through not only heat, but, you know, detergent as well. I used to run F10 through the rinse cycle. I didn't see any. I actually did swabs on some of the tubs to see if like I was eliminating a mold or anything like that in that step, and it was the same across the board. So I think just that temperature sterilization of everything really just wipes everything clean inside of there.
Yeah, temp's the best. I agree with that. If you all could keep one snake the rest of your life, what would it be? I think John and I'm already going to say Western hognose / plains. What would you say, John?
Western hognose snake. I honestly... I don't know of any other snake species that I would keep.
Dave, how about you?
It's always been the boa constrictor.
All right, boa constrictor. All right, good. Yeah. And then Brand says, better yet, if you could only keep one hognose morph, which would it be? I'm going to have to go with Super Arctic, just because of variability and how cool they are.
Same. I'm a big, you know, I love where Super Arctics are at now. You know, we are seeing some variation. I know you're seeing them in your collection as well, Jeff. You know, I've got the stark black and white ones. I got the ones with the pink highlights. I've got everything along there. Favorite morph. I'm glad it's affordable now. You know, I remember when, you know, they were like $5,000 a piece. You know what I mean? And, you know, it's affordable for everyone now to be able to get a Super Arctic. And it's my favorite. It's my favorite.
Yeah, imagine if I didn't mess up like a dumbass, they'd be held their price even better.
Yeah.
We would be all off a lot better for it if I never did that.
I like Sable as well. I've always been a fan of Sable and how it interacts with other genes. Once again, the Super Arctic Sables. I love hatching those things. I mean,
those are
the
cool.
Variability there. I know you have the blue ones and the red ones, Jeff. I do as well. And the variability in one single clutch is interesting. You know, you can have all of those color palette inside of one clutch, and I just think that's amazing. You know, I keep everything cataloged. Everything has an ID tag back here, and it'll be funny. You know, I'll have a line of Super Arctic Sable complex animals. And, you know, like I said, you know, one will be blue, one will be solid black, one will be, you know, almost black, but with a lot of red screaming through it. And, you know, then you'll have one that, you know, you would scratch your head and wonder if it was even a Super Arctic Sable or just like this weird looking Super Arctic. And, you know, but it has that little, I know you've probably, I don't know if you look at that, but the underneath of the chin with all the sables, it has like that heart underneath of them.
Yeah,
and, you know,
the Swiss has that too. The Swiss have that too.
The Swiss has it, but it's more speckled, it seems like, than a solid heart underneath of its chin. I don't know if you've looked at, you know, I don't have a lot of Swisses. I only have, I think I got like I got 3 visuals and then some hets, but all of my visuals are, you know, they got that speckled heart on the bottom of their chin versus like the solid, like the Sable, but they're similar genes. You know, I think they're interesting. I am going to be outcrossing the crap out of them for the next probably 2 or 3 years, just because, you know, that's what I do. I reverse engineer something when I get it. But, you know, it'll be interesting to see, you know, what my path takes with them. I know you've done wonderful things, Jeff. And, you know, I've been real impressed with some, especially the Xanthic Swiss chocolates that you made. I think they're beautiful. And, you know, it'll be neat to just see how and when I plug my different lines of things into the Swiss to be able to see. Now, are your adult Swisses getting light as well, Jeff, or do you have black ones, or, you know?
I'd say like some, like, here's the one thing is like, I would say they don't really change much. Once they're like, you know, they change, I'd say more just based on them just being mature and their scale structure as an adult hognose being like more dull and not as shiny and reflectant as, like, you know, the baby hognose scales are. These adult keeled thick hognose scales, like, you know, as they get older, the structure definitely impacts their pigment and the way it looks, especially as their scales are like more like kind of like a matte finish. But yeah, I'd say like they just don't really change much. I'd say you get like maybe a little darker, and then yeah, maybe some do get like slightly lighter. The one thing I will say though is they don't change a lot.
Yeah, man.
Unlike the
know,
Sable.
I got 2 that I had gotten that were almost solid black, and they look like normals.
Yeah,
you know. It's
when they first hatch, I'd say that's the thing was like the Sables from the time they hatch and as they age, we all know they get darker and darker, and they can continue getting darker. Like you can have like a 2-year-old Sable, and then it will be even darker 3 years later. They just continually get darker and darker as they age. Now with the Swiss, yeah, when they hatch out, they're always the darkest when they hatch, especially because I think they're more shiny, so you're getting more like light reflection black, kind of like a wet water snake. Like a wet water snake, they're not black, but they almost appear black. Yeah. You know, they look, especially from afar, it's like, wow, that snake almost looks black, but it's not. But yeah, once they get to like a decent size, yeah, I've had some like Swiss, they're like, these things are dark as hell when they hatch. And then, yeah, after a couple sheds and, you know, they definitely lighten up. But I feel like once they're like 30, 40 grams, they don't really change much from that point, other than their kind of scale structure, you know, kind of impacting the way we perceive their pigment.
Ah, that's interesting. You know, hopefully, you know, I've had the complete opposite experience. So hopefully with more breeding trials with mine, you know, I'll be able to, yeah, I'll share this one with you. It's freaking kind of incredible how light this one got. Yeah. You know, you would think that, I mean, you can see that it's a, let me see, a Swiss chocolate from its head.
Oh, yeah. That's weird. That looks like one of those weird ones, and I usually only get the males like that. Yeah, most of mine aren't turning that light. That thing is like, I know what you're, it's got that like ashy look.
Yeah, and then its belly, you can really see the Swiss in it just from, you know, there. But yeah, this one was like almost solid black when I got it. I got it at about 30 grams or so, and that's what it turned into. You know, it's interesting for sure. It's a pretty snake, you know, but, you know, I would probably like them more if I had a little bit more experience with some. I like the hyperpigmenting of Sable. So it's definitely something that I, you know, will keep on. You know, I've got so much Sable in my collection. I want to kind of go down a different route as well. And I got
right. I'm the same way. I got like fucking, I feel like Sable in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good answer, Gene, so it makes sense. Then Liam asked, this goes for any of you three, regarding hognose, what is, we could just apply this to like snake breeding and keeping in general. What is one thing you feel every keeper should know that isn't discussed very regularly? So, John, what do you think? I know it used to be like kind of like quarantine, but anymore now that's what everybody fucking talks about. So 7 years ago, it would have been quarantine. Nobody talks about this, or 10, 20 years ago. Now everybody talks about it. So I don't know. I feel like everybody covers their bases now. So I feel like most stuff is like discussed fairly well. But I still think quarantine is still one that's kind of missed a little bit because it's just probably not like talked about too quickly. I feel like it's something like people end up finding out about like a year later or months later.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. I think cleanliness, you know, is something that, people need to discuss more. Like, hey, man, don't. I always use the same thing. Like, if you eat your own shit, you're gonna get sick. So keep your cages clean. So when you're feeding a snake, it's not eating its own shit all the time and stuff. Like, I think that's something that people don't like to talk about, and I think they should. You should be on top of your husband. But I think also on the other hand of that same topic, don't be hyper fixated on things that you can't control. I know cryptosporidium is something that, everyone doesn't want to talk about but I mean, if you let that consume your life and you read everything about it online, it's going to destroy your like and love of the animals. Is it something to be aware of? 100%. Like, I think everyone should be aware of it. But if you look at everything like a vector that could kill everything, I think there's so much more dangerous things out there, than that protozoan in particular. There's all kinds of things, but I think that's something that probably more people are scared to talk about, and it should be discussed more openly.
Well, what's something that you
there's been some real good studies recently. I mean, I know I listened to that Colubrid and Colubrid radio. They had some lady on there that was talking about it, and how the biggest vector for her inside of her collection was a fly, which I thought that was incredibly amazing. That was the biggest vector for her. For Cryptosporidium serpensis, and she did an actual study on it. Then I want to say Orient Society did a study on Cryptosporidium as well with Florida king snakes.
Okay,
that they were catching out of the wild. They had, I want to say there was like 100%. 100% of the animals coming out of the wild were positive for it. But it's interesting as well. There's some good research studies on it. King snakes, milk snakes, cobras. A lot of these things are testing positive for it coming out of the wild, but they're also showing, zero adverse effects from the Cryptosporidium inside of their system, and they're snake eaters. So it's interesting that it goes around that, where those snakes are probably more likely to encounter it being ingested because they're eating weak, infected snakes, possibly in the wild, but they're actually able to fight it a little bit easier. So I don't know. It's just interesting looking from the outside in on that topic right there.
Yeah, like all leopard and fat tail geckos, they all have cryptosis in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's going to definitely be some snake species that are going to have it. There's one wild hognose. Man, I posted it in the Discord, but it was carrying I believe there's a protozoa. It wasn't Cryptosporidium though. But yeah, I don't know if wild hognose, like the thing is, like I've seen wild hognose from like Texas. Those ones seem to be the most inclined to be sick versus the northern locale wild caught ones. I've never really seen those ever being sick, but like you're saying, there can be asymptomatic animals. But, if you're looking at hognose carrying Cryptosporidium from the wild, you think a lot of these initial collections would have all had quite a bit of cryptosis, or there would have been a lot of issues. Because the thing is, like, even though they do fine in the wild with it, or some species do, when you're keeping them in close quarters and they're able to reinfect themselves a lot, their bodies are going to handle it very differently. So in the wild, 100%. A species might be able to handle it versus in captivity, they should be breaking out with it. And which you said it was a king snake that they're finding all had Cryptosporidium in the wild?
Yeah, it's actually the Brooks locale, the South Florida king snakes. Yeah, that they are finding in the sugarcane fields down there. Every single one of them was positive for the Cryptosporidium serpensis, but they were all they were all fine. But just like what you said, they're in the wild, something with that protozoan passes through feces and they poop outside, they crawl away.
Yes.
Inside a captive environment, like you're saying, but it's also self-limiting as well. Like it, if it can't be transferred through egg or anything like that. So I think being aware, but not being hyper fixated on things like that, that could destroy your love of the hobby. Like I said, with boas, there's inclusion body disease. That's one of the ones that everyone is scared the bejesus out of. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave. is it now? I'm not saying accepted, but they're saying a lot of the boa constrictors may have IBD present in them, but it's not affecting them.
Well, you know, arenavirus is the big thing being talked about in the boa community. I think it sounds a little more common in Europe. I've heard in collections. So I would have thought it would be a little more prevalent in collections, but I've spoken with people that have actually started doing testing, and they're getting a lot of negatives back. Now, I know some of the arguments are if the animal's not shedding the virus, it'll come back negative. I don't know if that'd be the case with this, but I'm going to go through and actually start testing some of my animals because I have some adults that I want to make for sale, and I'm kind of curious. Everything that we've ever sent overseas, baby-wise, we've tested before leaving the country because we were required to, and we've never had a positive come back. But I have heard of some collections in the industry that have had positives, and they weren't collections you thought would have had a positive.
Right.
So it's hard to say because, like I said, I've heard a lot of arguments on this. I've heard a lot about how it gets passed on. I believe if IBD was as bad as they said it was, it would have killed off every collection a long time ago.
Yep.
So I don't know. I don't have a really good answer on this, but again, I'm curious, so I'm going to do some testing for fun.
No, I think that's valuable. You know, I think that's great. I do routine testing as well on some of my stuff, and you know, I would like to even get farther into it and start testing wild animals. You know, for different vectors like that, just to understand them more. You know, Jeff, you were talking about a wild hognose snake carrying a protozoa. You know what? You know, like
what they had it. I can't remember what it is. I could try to find it. I posted it in Discord. It wasn't cryptosis. I don't know if wild hog. Here's the thing: if you've had a wild hognose in like Texas that had cryptosis, I wouldn't be that surprised.
Right.
The northern localities where the populations aren't as dense. The thing is, though, they are eating a lot of, you know, lizards and stuff, and sometimes lizard species can carry it. You know, so is it possible they can contract it, or certain locales might have it, or maybe all hognoses have it in the wild? Sure. But the thing is, like, all wild fat tails and leopard geckos have cryptosis, and it's like that's something you still don't want. Even though it's like they've evolved with having it, like, you know, within those populations for like who knows how long, they still don't do that well with it. They eventually succumb to it when they get older. It can wear them out. I have seen people with, like, you know, that have found like Mexican hognose or like a southern locale of like a plains that's pretty ragged looking, like it probably laid eggs and it's like really depleted. But that's the other thing too, is like if they're laying eggs in the wild and they're bouncing back really well, it's unlikely that they have cryptosis, or if they do, then it's not affecting them very much at all, and they have really good antibodies for it.
Right.
Because, you know, even the wild leopard geckos, like, they have cryptosis, but dude, they'll find ones in the wild, and I've seen pictures of them. These things are like dying of cryptosis in the wild sometimes. And the only thing I can really think of that makes sense is like leopard geckos and African fat tail geckos are very prolific. Now they have cryptosis in the wild that limits their ability to be even more prolific and limits their ability for the weak ones to survive. So imagine how many more there would be if cryptosis didn't even affect them. So it's kind of one of those things that kind of like, you know, acts as, you know, population control. And obviously the more population that there is of a species, they can probably have more of it and spread it around. And then the thing is too, with Cryptosporidium and reptiles, there's very little research done on it. Like, obviously there's very little grants. There's very little interest in it. So I'd imagine that there could even be, because cryptosis is like a very tricky, very hard to study protozoa, with all the different ranges of Cryptosporidium, whether it's Cryptosporidium from Africa, Pakistan, or the United States. You'd think that these things have to be subspecies, or actually they'd be separate species, because they're not like integrating at all. But you know, I don't know if protozoa taxonomy like rules vary anymore. But I like then like a Colubrid, like, you know, like locale, you know, say like, you know, talking about integrates. But anyway, I think there's probably more species, and there's definitely different strains of it. Like when my dad and I had wild caught African fat tail geckos, We got them from different locales. We got ones from Togo, and I think the other ones came from Benin, and we got them from separate importers. And we knew they all had cryptosis, but when we mixed those locales, because we're going to breed these different locales together, and then we'll have these wild offspring locales versus just breeding them in the locales we got them, we thought it'd be interesting to cross them. Those ones got so violently sick, and the only thing that we could really make sense of, because there's so many of them, was like, well, they're from different locales. The cryptosporidium in these completely different countries, even though they might be only a few hundred miles away, is different. And so when they're being exposed to it, they didn't do as they did very horribly. Actually, they all broke out, and it's a 100% fatality rate, which normally we didn't have that.
No, it makes sense. That's I've discussed this recently about that exact same thing. Like what wild snakes, what are they carrying? But there's no research. There's not going to be any funding out there, because we're talking about millions of dollars of funding.
Let's just go out and find a hognose, have it shit, and then just send it to one of our good vet has a good university. $750 and we'll know. But we have to deal with a few hognose. I have 2 wild hognose now, but they were in somebody's collection with other snakes, so you can't use those, because it's like, well, if they have something, we could just say, hey, he could have spread it from his other snakes to these ones.
Right. Now it would be interesting, but you said something specific. Well, I don't know what is the leopard gecko one? Is it Varani or what?
It's a lizard species, so it'd be Varani. The other thing is too, sometimes these tests, they were getting positives for both. And I'm wondering if it's the PCR just having trouble, and it's a different species of cryptosis.
Actually identifying, right? Yeah. It could be Varani, it could be Varani, leopard geckois. There could be, like you said, completely different locales and species of this. But to actually dial it in and get the actual funding behind that to be able to identify every single locale of different, cryptosporidium, we're not there yet. No one is, to really get there yet.
Yeah, nobody. So. The problem is the universities, like there isn't like the funding for anybody to give that much of a shit. It'd be a big one too. But imagine, there's cryptosporidium and African fat-tailed gecko populations from Benin, Togo, Ghana, Burkina Faso. And then you have leopard geckos from Pakistan. You can't tell me that those cryptosis, protozoas are exactly the same. They can't be. They're a whole continent away, and they're affecting a very similar species, and they're very interchangeable. If you take a sick African fat-tailed gecko and put it near a leopard gecko, they get it immediately. It's very it transfers over a lot, and that's the one thing I've noticed with snake species. And then speaking to John, they actually found Crotalus in the wild; those had cryptosporidium too. Yeah, and then I know king cobras, they had cryptosporidium. But the funny thing is, king cobras, like you're saying, another snake eater, but even the Brooks kings, they're lizard eaters, eating a lot of little lizards. And it makes sense if there's any cryptosis around on our continent, which it's all over the other ones, why wouldn't these species of reptiles get it? So why wouldn't hognose get cryptosis in the wild? But the funny thing is, too, again, is I feel like it's a interesting thing to know, but at the same time, even if hognose have cryptosis in the wild, we still don't want it in a captive one. So it's still the same thing.
You or me wouldn't go out and grab a garter snake out of our yard and then throw it in the middle of our rack in our breeding room.
It'd be a bad idea.
Yeah, it would be a bad idea. And at that point, I think crypto would probably be, a little bit farther down on the list than some of the other pathogens that would probably be exposed, in that setting. So, like I said, hyper fixating on some of these, I know we went off on a tangent on that one. This is great stuff, but I love talking about this stuff. But going back to what he said, hyper fixating on some of this stuff can ruin your love for a hobby. Because you can look at, you can look at your stuff like your Skullface that you're talking about and being like, that's a pathogen causing, the wobble effect. Maybe it's like an amoeba in the snake's brain that's just passing. You would get hyper fixated on that. And I think getting back to it and enjoying the hobby, taking care of your animals, doing the best of our ability to be able to take care of these animals, keeping proper quarantine, cleaning, and sanitation practices inside of your area that you're keeping your snakes. It doesn't have to be a facility. It could be at home, but don't go outside or, go to your buddy's house that a snake just died and be like, hey, can I have all your hide boxes to throw in with my snake? I think having common sense there, can help with some of that to just make sure your collection's healthy. So
Brandon's got a question here. What's up with the crazy fluctuations in the price of some morphs like pink pastel or true hypo?
I mean, I don't know. True hypo is kind of a weird one for me, anyways. I know we've discussed it, Jeff. On how it's actually being passed on, and how it's heterozygous for the true hypo. I have some like true hypo-ish animals in my collection that I haven't really bred to see how they're passing the genes on, but I don't know. I mean, well, what's your thoughts on that, Jeff? I mean, pink pastel. I think pink pastel's a gene that's coming back to the surface. That's always been cool. Jeff knows I've worked with pink pastel now for a long time. We made the sunsets and the opals and everything along those lines with the multi combos with the pink pastel. And I know, Jeff, you're working on quite a few different projects with it.
Yeah, but where'd you get your pink pastels from originally, John?
Oh, what did I think me and Dan went in on some pink pastel stuff, and I can't remember where he got his from.
Yeah, where did he get his from?
I can't quite remember, because I got my pink pastel stuff in as hets and then made visuals and then went backwards with them and reverse engineered everything, going down a couple different avenues, and then brought them back together again. So, I'm assuming that, honestly, I want to say that Brian Barczyk is where his came from, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I know where mine came from, but the one thing is, like, the crazy price fluctuations, I'd say the one thing with pink pastel albino is because it's scarce and it's not out there, people can sometimes ask whatever. So then sometimes people will have just like normal pink pastels. Maybe they hatched out 5 and they'll see that one sold for $300 and they're like, oh, I'll sell mine for $300. They sell out because he priced them too cheap. Then somebody else goes and there's like no pink pastels. And they're like, I'm going to put $700-800 each on them. And then they sell it $700-800 each.
Yeah.
So just because there's just not a lot of them. I mean, that stuff happens even in the ball python community. Dave, you've seen it. Remember Desert Ghost? Once that popularity hit, and since there wasn't a lot of them, those things went from like a regular Desert Ghost for like $400 or $500 up to like $1,800 within a year.
Yeah, so I mean, all you guys are talking about is supply and demand, though. Some of those projects,
basic business.
So, but because you're right. Desert Ghost was a $200 female and not very desirable. We brought up the Paint Project too recently. That was another animal that was a $200-300 female. Not a lot of guys wanted it. During COVID, popularity sprung up, and I think female paints and female DGs got up to almost $2,000 during COVID.
Yeah. And so the true hypo, I think the issue with that one is there was years ago, again, scarcity of it. And then there was a few people that were like trying to get it, and it was like really hard to find. And the people that would sell them commanded a lot of money for them, more so than I think they were worth, in my opinion. And you still see some remnants of that. And I think it's also a misunderstanding of how that trait works. So a lot of people still think it's just very hard to come by recessive mutation, when really, from what I've experienced, it's polygenic. And really, it's the same as pistachio. And the funny thing is, I said that, and then as I said, it's actually Dave from DBZ Exotics, Crystal's one friend, and he said, he goes, actually, funny thing is, he goes, I think he said his Estlin, he goes, bred a pistachio to a true hypo, and he got visuals from it. I'm like, yeah, of course. I mean, they look the same. And, that kind of variant pops up. Like, I've now had the true hypo looking trait stuff pop up in 3 separate parts of my collection. The funny thing is, it didn't have them in my collection it was somewhat there. There wasn't any visual phenotypes of that. But selectively line breeding my purple extreme red stuff, now that I'm line breeding, if you have anything that's, a trait that can populate and then make that phenotype, such as a true hypo or pistachio, when you start bringing that stuff back, if there's anything there that can do that, can then start appearing because you're now bringing it back and you can populate more of those alleles. Populating meaning just increasing those alleles. That's what we're doing with lemon ghosts and reds. The more you line breed it, the more you're populating those alleles to produce reds or yellows. And so anyway, so now I have like true hypos or pistachio, whatever you want to call them. I have had like 4 different ones pop up in different parts of my collection. But they're lower key ones. But I know I already took one and it kind of almost turned into like a normal. It wasn't that crazy looking as an adult. And I bred it back to one from an unrelated one that I popped up. And those babies came out real high expression, true hypo. But nice. I think they're cool. I just think they're like a $400 snake, though. They're just not like a few $1,000s. That's all.
Yeah, I've had them pop up in my ghost stuff. Not lemon ghost. Well, I guess. No, there's no lemon ghost in that lemon ghost lineage. I got some that popped up in my ghost, and it's just like what you're saying. Like they're very subtle. Like the bellies will have a purplish look versus the black look of the belly that I'm seeing on the ones that I'm hatching. And they're very subtle. At first, I thought they were just like a real low expression ghost because they actually came from, I got super condas that are 100% het for albino ghosts. And I bred those back together, and that's what I'm getting them out of. And at first, I thought they were just weird ghosts that were popping up because I was getting the purple bellies. And I think that's what they are. It's more like a true hypo. And, they're cool looking. But like you said, they're very subtle. It's not something, very drastic that I feel like can command a high, price tag. Same thing, I know I'm, a lot of people have asked me about them, even in the Discord that you have, Jeff, the cantaloupe stuff that I got, it's just, I think it's just a little line bred trait. I mean, is it replicatable? Yes. There's no super form, anything like that. They're neat looking snakes, but at the end of the day, they're not like a $5,000 snake or anything. It's a few $100 snake that's cool to look at, plug it into your projects and have fun with it. It'll make subtle differences in your projects and yeah, that's it.
Okay. Very cool. Oh, actually the one thing is, I'll have to reread it and go over it because I just thought about it, is the study by Dr. Andrew Dorso. And it's the ontogenic shift in dietary habits of plains hognose snakes in Illinois. And it was either that one, but they were actually looking at protozoas present in plains hognose, and they weren't finding any. And they were even showing protozoas that amphibians commonly carried, and to see if the hognose in that area had them, and most of the hognose didn't. And they kind of likened it partially to the hognose's diet not being as high of an amphibian percentage as initially thought. But at the same time, it's like, well, these hognoses could have built up antibodies for that. Just because species get... The one thing is, it doesn't seem like many species can build up, it seems like, antibodies that well for cryptosis. Other than, those Brooks Kings sound like they're doing well, but again, a lot of this stuff can do well until, like, in captivity, like you say, like they get a high infection rate because they're more exposed to their own stool. Just something I thought about. Don't want to rehash the whole crypto thing. We talked about that a long time. Yeah. Kind of like you're saying. No,
but it could be an evolutionary thing. They're looking at the protozoas in these amphibians. Maybe the spikes on the outside of the protozoans aren't able to adhere to the inside of a hognose snake.
Yes.
So it just passes right through them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it can't. The lining of their GI tract prevents it. That makes sense.
Right.
This guy is Dave Alive. Weekend at Dave's. That is pretty funny. Dave's got the glasses, everything. If Dave died, we could continue doing podcasts with his body, and then.
I'm just here in case you needed me. You didn't really need me today.
No, I know. We talked about that before, but I was like, you might be able to ask particular questions that I might not think of because,
Yeah, you guys are doing just fine. I'm just gonna sit back and enjoy.
Dave, I some people were asking me as well. They're like, "Is that Dave guy going to be on this thing?" And I was like, "I don't know," And I said, he definitely brings the entertainment factor to the podcast for sure. Jeff, especially me and you start rapping about things. We can get very scientific on things, and then Dave brings in the normal people into it, and is like, I mean, look at it.
I dumb it down a little bit. I got you, bud.
I like it. I like it. It's good. It's good. So,
what's the top 3 things you all would test a snake for? What were you gonna say, Dave?
Oh, nothing. I was gonna say, I think I'm gonna leave. Can I leave? Right. I'm exhausted. I've been up since 5:30.
Yeah, that's fine, man. Yeah, I know you said that you were coming from Will's and you're doing all the other stuff.
Yeah. You guys are doing great. Just keep on going. Yeah.
All right.
Hey, next time we're down in Florida, we should do one of these, all 3 of us, and maybe Dave, I don't know if you're a drinker or whatnot, but we could all 3 start drinking and just do a podcast until someone falls out. I think it'd be a great time.
Well, we talk about that, but Junior's not much of a drinker.
I know.
And
I'm
already a little bit too much.
Now and then. Every now and then, in special occasions, I will.
Yeah, no, I've always wanted to do drunk history podcasts in the reptile industry. Get some OGs on there and get drunk.
That would be great. I would love that. That would be awesome.
Get some people real drunk and start trying to get them to shit talk. That would be
I don't think you'll win that battle, buddy. But hey, I appreciate you having me out though. But like I said, you guys, it's like I wasn't even here today. So strong finish. I'll talk to you guys both a little later.
All right. Thanks for joining, Dave.
Of course. Hey, later, guys.
As always. See you later. Woke him up and now he's leaving. Yeah. Well, yeah, Dave was like, usually Dave is kind of at that 2-hour mark and we're like a little bit, but he came in like a half hour late. So that's like, that's because Dave even asked that before. He goes, do you even need me? And I was like, maybe not. I was like, but the thing is, I was like, I might not think of a particular question. And Dave is kind of like, he's usually pretty good. He's always good at asking questions. I think this time though, he's just kind of leaving us to it because we're already talking. So yeah, that's but we always appreciate Dave in here. He helps a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean, look at what he brought to the table with the spider ball python.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, dude, that is that's so valuable, that data right there, and just being able to understand how that could influence something in a hognose snake. And
yes,
he brings a lot to the table. Dave's a great guy.
He talks to a lot of people. Dave knows a lot. He doesn't give himself a lot of credit because sometimes he's not like real scientific with his, some of his he kind of is though. Like again, like he pays attention to that stuff. Like I'll talk to him and he'll be like, well, Warren Booth was saying this about pathogenesis. So yeah, he actually knows a lot of people. And if I say something about genetics, he even says like that Nick Mutton. He's like, you should talk to him. I guess he's somebody that's really deep into genetics, I guess. But yeah, Dave, like again, like the spider ball python. I remember I was talking about it, and then Dave was like, "Hey, actually, buddy, goes they did X-rays," and he's telling. That's I found it out from Dave.
No, that's great stuff right there. I mean, between me and you, I think we've figured out a lot of things the hard way, of course, throughout the years, keeping the, snakes. I wouldn't even just say Western hognose snakes in particular, but, there's so much stuff we can talk about. We can talk about, protozoans. We can talk about market. We can talk about, morphology. And we've both walked in that, you a little bit more than me, obviously, just because you have a little bit more tenure. But me, I immersed myself in it, and I've learned a lot. We've met a lot of people. We've done business together a lot, and it's something that I'm proud of, and that you should be as well. You've built a wonderful collection of hognose snakes and given a lot. You may not given as much as like I don't know. I can't even put a specific person. Into it, but I mean, you donate hugely to USARK every year. I know I see that a lot, and those are the people that are fighting for our rights for sure. And I do as well. I think their 3 Daytonas in a row. They raised $80,000 to $110,000, and I donated 10% of that every year.
Yeah, I know. I remember you're donating really huge in Daytona.
Yeah,
that's the one thing though. Like, obviously, we don't donate to get accolades from it or people to be, oh, you did this. But sometimes you donate and then nobody sees it. You're kind of like, man, I hope people know that I am supporting them.
Yeah, no, I don't, I don't go out there and be like, hey, US ARC,
Yeah.
I need you to like say something about me or anything like that. We do it because we appreciate what everyone else is doing and we know that they fight for us,
Yes,
and
they're very important, man. They really are, and
Yeah.
like I think that's the one new thing that a lot of people, and that's like I said at the beginning, because that's one thing with this channel. MJ's channel, everybody who's hosting always talks about US ARC because that's a very important aspect for all new keepers to know about, because without them we're gonna be in trouble. And they've actually done such a good job, because even a couple of years ago, there was a lot of fear of like some of these like the Lacey Act amendments where they're proposing like infringing on the ability to transfer animals across state lines, and them trying to eliminate like reptile shows and like programs and stuff like that. And since then, there hasn't really been anything, and US ARC's only gotten more powerful, and US ARC's got a lot of support, better lawyers now, and more money. Yeah. And so, it's like now if legislation's like proposed, I feel like it's has a lot harder time getting through. All the stuff is all getting shut down. They have like a 96, 97% like win rate. So they're not going to win them all, but they're winning like all the important ones, and they're winning for the most part. So props to US ARC, and props to everybody that helps donate, and props to anybody that helps, support or just spread information about them, even if you're not able to. Because I know that's one thing everybody's always talking about. Like, that's one thing, you go to these shows, and, some of these people go to shows just for fun, and they're not making a ton of money. And the shows are very expensive. The hotel's expensive, the tables are expensive, and then the food there's expensive. And they're saying donate, and they're like tip the bartenders really well. And I'm like, man, some of these people I know don't have, they don't have like forever money in their pockets.
Right. No, I agree with that. But, it is something that, it was important to me. I spared no expense on doing that. And it was, those guys are amazing. That's for sure. And he's from, I want to say he's from what? Southern Indiana.
Yeah. Phil Goss. Yeah. Phil Goss.
Yeah.
He used to, he was like a really good rep for ZooMed and worked for ZooMed for a long time. And then they really needed somebody that was reliable in US ARC. And so, now Phil's, I bet he's learned a lot. I know he has he's, because he works with these lawyers directly. And so he has like a grasp of law now. I don't know. Maybe he should try to get a law degree. I don't know if he needs it. I feel like
he's awesome. He I've been monthly down there at that Cincinnati show down there, and I know last year, the 2-day show, he set up a US ARC booth and came over. It was It was just nice seeing him up here in Ohio versus just running into him down in Daytona. So.
Yeah, Brandon asked, did it take some time in the hobby to pick up on little things like being able to identify true hypo popping up in random projects, or telling the difference between normals and low expression arctics? Yeah, that's kind of something that's like, I don't know how you feel about this one, John. I feel you pretty much the same way. It's tough. It depends on like how each individual person, because I know people that have been doing this for 25 years, and not to like bash some like people, but man, I know some people have been doing this for a long time, and they still don't really pick up on certain things. And that's just because their brains work differently, and that stuff might not be that overly important to them. Maybe they second guess it. Maybe for whatever reason, like, because like I know some people there, they say no matter how nice the Arctic is, they're like, I still can't tell the difference between an Arctic and like a normal, or like a nice normal. And I think they're just getting too into their heads about like saying like, well, a green hypo and this line trait could kind of look like this, therefore I don't know what the fuck is an Arctic and what's not. Right. And then there's the true hypo, even the guy that originated them, he was like saying they're recessive. And, and when you ask him how he made them, he did it with selective line breeding. So I really think it depends on how into genetics the person is. The more into genetics you're in, and the more you want to actually be in it. And that's the thing. That's what kind of stuff. The people that's what's really important to them, they pick up on it sooner and quicker. And then the people that it isn't that important to them, they don't really pick up on it sometimes.
Right. No, I agree with that. Just that, I agree with that 100%. It's something that I studied, when I was in college and in school, and just on my own, just reading books about Mendel and, what it is. So, John, what do you think is going on with your not redline polygenic blind ties? I think it's a form of redline going on. I don't think it's, there's anything special or crazy about it. It's just something that's in that line of my ties. I have a lot of them that pop out of the specific line. I mean, almost whole clutches of them, but they are beautiful. I mean, I may have some I could show real quick, but even just regular Mai Tais here. Let's see, is that going down?
That was really
rad. We're getting these nice brick reds, inside of them, and a lot of these real red ones as well have a lot of hyperpigmenting that are coming in from the toffee belly gene, which is really cool to see that come in. But it is a developing gene. Sometimes they hatch out a lot. They look a lot more like normal Mai Tais, and they get redder with age. So.
We hope someone doesn't write a long Facebook post about the origin of those. That's a Justin Mitchum reference. You may have summoned the devil. We got to move on.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, let's move on from that. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. Well, yeah. What are your thoughts on Toffee Glow?
Well, I mean, toffee glows, I think they're hard to distinguish, especially if you have certain lines that you're putting together, because toffee is so variable on its own already. You have some like the RBE polygenic toffees that, are extremely red and high contrasty. And then you have a lot of the ones that are more butter and, very, I would say, khaki colored, almost like some of the old Evans hypos, like some of the original Evans hypos. They're more of a khaki color. So I think you got a huge variability there. And then to make toffee glows as well, you're just layering on a T negative and a T positive albino essentially. And, I don't know, I may have toffee glows. I think actually a lot of my original Sable stuff was het toffee, and I incorporated that into a lot of my Sunburst programs. So I have toffies that pop up every now and then, and a lot of times I think they're the double visual of the toffee and albino. I know I sold one recently and someone claimed it to be a toffee glow right out the gate, but I just said it may be one.
Don't you like that when you tell somebody it may be something and then they get it and they're like, this is what it is?
Oh, yeah.
Hold on, settle down.
I mean, it is very odd looking, but, I said, hey, it could be, homozygous for the toffee gene as well. But that's
is it like really bright?
The way it does possibly. But, I'm not bashing them or anything. Honestly, most likely it will prove to be one. But, that's when we first saw the first Super Arctic Superconda Mai Tais. They came from Dan, them ones that he hatched, I don't know, years ago. Those were from my Arctic Conda hets for Sunburst that I sent him, and toffees popped out of them. So
I remember that. Yeah, because he messaged me and he goes, what the fuck are these? I'm like, those are toffees, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he thought they were lavenders at first. And I'm like, well, the funny thing is like the Super Arctic toffees, they do kind of look like moonstones a bit, especially when they first hatch. There's definitely a strong resemblance there. But this that one that you said is possibly toffee glow, what was this, like a very bright? Was it like more colorful?
Yeah. It just had those. It was one of them ones that just pops out of your collection, Jeff. It was an Arctic albino, but it didn't look like any of the other Arctic albinos in the clutch, and his Posset Sable as well. And it just had that toffee look to it. And
gotcha.
What I was looking for on the snake in particular that made me think that way was some of that hyperpigmenting that was coming through, that the albino was stripping out again. And I could see it on the back and on its belly in some places.
Yeah. Where, the one thing that's cool is like toffees, there always seems to be like polygenic traits that kind of follow toffee around. Like if you have toffees, generally it always seems like, not all the time, but like you get the RBE stuff is always kind of like lingering there for the most part. You get some really pretty animals. So it makes sense that you combine it its albino. That's why I was asking. I'm like, even if the toffee doesn't interact with the albino that much, what might help interact is actually those poly, like RBE lines. Yeah. So now you're putting RBE and albino, which RBE doesn't really exist in albinos because it's always with the toffee stuff. So that would be really interesting. And then somebody was talking about like and I could see it. Like I have like a couple toffee glows, and somebody said the bellies, and the toffee glow bellies I do have, they do seem a little more lavender. But I don't know, man. It's not like anything where it's like night and day, where it's like, oh, this is real. It's definitely not obvious, but yeah, they seem to be brighter and prettier. So
yeah, that's where I went with it when I was looking for that hyperpigmenting, because a lot of the toffees that I have that hyperpigmenting. So I was looking for the add and the take away with the T negative albino to see it.
All right, now could genetic testing become a prevalent thing in the future of hognose breeding? I talked about this the one time, and I say, yeah, for sure, definitely will. I think John will agree on that. If genetic shed testing comes out, it would be good to know what our animals are carrying. So if you have it that's like pos headache, xanthic, and lavender, you're going to want to know. And if you can do that with shed testing, like, why not? You're not going to use it all the time, because if you shed tested like all 800 babies, you're going to be like, I don't know, like fucking $18,000 in the hole or something. But you'd want to test some of them.
It can fast forward projects though too, Jeff.
Definitely.
When you think about somebody that just wants a het xanthic and a het sable, you now have a storm cloud project that if you only want to test 10 animals to get your storm cloud project going, and I'm talking about in the infancy of storm clouds, I'm just using that as an example. But you could have 2 hets instead of buying the visuals to be able to make your own hets to go down that road. It makes it much easier to make those.
Yeah. Well, that's the one thing too, is like, yeah, you could fast track projects, because you can now, like, if you wanted to make a visual combination, but let's say you have only a het, let's say you want to make something with lavender, but you only have a het lavender, you can still use that, shed test your animals, and 50% of them are most likely, if you get the right odds, are going to be het lavender. And the other thing too, I was talking about with the shed testing, the one thing I didn't see anybody really talk about yet, and it's definitely coming, is this is a cool one, John. You can now indefinitely outcross recessive traits, because you could take a het albino, breed it to a normal, shed test those ones, take those het albinos, outcross them again, shed test those, and you can make really outcrossed recessives now. Where before it was like you'd have to make too many pos hets, or if you did it too far, you're going to get, you'd get all mixed up with, like, the ones that aren't het. And generally, people are only breeding one generation out to make full hets and breeding back. This way, you can take a full het and you can breed it out multiple generations. You just keep shed testing, and then be pretty soon, before you know it, you could have an albino that's 4 generations removed from any original albino line. So, yeah, the shed testing offers a lot. Diversity in genetics, fast tracking projects, and then finding out if your stuff's pos het for anything.
A lot of people that were working with that Lucy gene in its infancy, when they first got their hands on it, could have really used those shed tests.
Oh, yeah.
So they didn't mix up their males and get pushed behind on that leucistic project.
Yeah. The one thing is with the project, or it definitely takes them a few like generations. Like, you can't have the animals too closely related when they're first shed testing them. There has to be some diversity, because like if there's like, let's say only 50 of a morph, and that's it, they're all too closely related for them to find the unique spikes, because there's going to be too many unique ununique alleles, too many common alleles, because they're too closely related.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah. Speaking of diversity and possible deformities, have y'all talked about the breeder who is breeding dwarf hognose? We have not talked about that person. I don't even know who this person is. I did hear about them, but I don't know who this person is. There's always a few that pop up every now and then that have short bodies, but I think this is referencing, AJ talked about it in the Discord. He's like, no, these aren't short-bodied hognoses. These are just hognoses that stayed really, really small. But there's so many factors that could keep them small. It's because it's a bacterial issue. Generally slow growth that's just keeping them small, especially when it's drastic and there's no like physical anatomical changes. It's probably due to some like something's just suppressing growth, and I don't think it's a gene. I think it's overall health of the animal.
I could push back on that a little bit with the ones that we're seeing. It's coming from a specific line of sable, and there are some dwarfs that pop out. I've done testing on these animals. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just small. I won't ever breed them though. They're the males. I want to say I've got a couple males that are from that line that are 4 and 5 years old, and they're probably 20 grams. And then females that are about 60 grams, and they lay eggs every year. But I don't breed them, but they lay infertile eggs every year. And
how many are they laying?
Like 6, 7 eggs.
Oh, that's actually an okay amount.
Yeah, I mean it's not a lot, but it would be consistent with like a wild type hognose snake in the wild. I would think, but they are small. And Dan brought that up to me as well, that he was finding a dwarf gene in some of his original line of sables, but I don't know how much fact there was behind that. It was just a brief discussion that we had in passing about that. So yeah, but the ones that I'm seeing, like I said, they're just tiny. Nothing wrong with them.
They're good feeders. They feed every 4 or 5 days, every 7 days.
You gotta watch your hands around them. It's those type of animals, and they latch onto me. Honestly, seems like more than the other snakes, but they're very small, very small. I won't ever breed them though. Like I said, they lay eggs every year, but I don't know if it would kill the females if they had a fertile egg. And
it would probably
I'm not
be
in it
good,
for that, man.
you
know that about me, Jeff. I've got snakes. I'm not a proponent of force feeding. I kind of draw a hard line there. If I have a snake that's not going to thrive, I don't want it in my breeding program, so I wouldn't want to put it in someone else's program. It's just my personal stance on it. I know that people think differently on that. I'll give you every opportunity to eat. Like I'll scent with 40 different scents if I have to try and get you to eat. But if you don't want to live, you ain't going to live. And on the other side of that, if I have a semi-deformed snake that would be a decent pet for somebody, I don't feed them to one of the king snakes just because they're fucked up or something. I'll give them the opportunity to eat, and then give them to a good home if they need them, or if somebody wants them, and I know it's going to a decent home. So I don't have a lot of those around. Producing as many as we do, Jeff. I'm way smaller than Jeff. I like to produce maybe 500 to 700 animals a year, but out of that, I'll get 5 to 7 animals that are just weird in a way, whether it's a kinking or I have one this year that looks like it was a twin that never separated. It's kind of weird looking, but it eats great, so I'll find a good home for it.
Yeah, that's what I do. If they eat, the one thing I found, the way I look at it is as long as the baby hognose is just naturally healthy, they all want to eat. But sometimes, the presentation that we offer them just doesn't, resonate with that individual baby. Because I've had ones you try to give them a live pink, you do all kinds of scent things, everything you could think of. You do toad, lizard, frog, salamander scent. You mix them all together, and you get these small percent that just absolutely don't want to eat. But if you offer those ones like a little lizard, 9 out of 10 times they will eat it. So a lot of it is just these real small percent of individuals, for whatever reason, they have just this natural instinctive propensity to just go after, let's say, a small amphibian or a small lizard. But it's really hard to have that. We don't always have that on hand. So that's one of the big issues there. Now, Brandon asks, how are the purple people eater projects going? John's got those. Both sable and lavender have so many different phenotypes, and the lavender can be hard to capture on camera. They must be amazing looking in person. John actually definitely probably has more purple people eaters than I do, and he has some older ones, so he can definitely talk about that.
Yeah, they photograph like crap, but the projects are going. I did get to the finish line with a lot of those projects. We've got Arctic Conda ones now. We've got all the incompletes into them. But when I make something like that, I don't look to start mass producing them. I don't have a ton in my collection. I've probably got, I don't know, maybe five now that I have kept back for myself. But I've got the adults, and what I do is I just go in a completely opposite direction with them to outcross to make new lines. I've got 4 unrelated lines now that I can bring back together in the future. But the ones that I was most excited about this year was the Arctic Honda Sunburst, 100% het for lavenders. I produce a lot of those from a super sunburst female that I bred Lav Sable Het Albino to, and the babies came out stunning. But as far as phenotypes, I've kept my my lavenders lavender. I haven't crossed them in with a lot of red stuff or anything. I tried to keep them more of the blue line. So I've seen that a lot in my gene pool with my lavenders that have popped out from those. They have the nice original lavender look to them. If you could put, if you could say what the original lavenders look like. I know David sent me pictures of the first ones that he hatched, and they look pretty consistent. But I'm real impressed. There's a guy overseas, Louis Valtese, Bavarian Hogs. He makes probably some of the best lavenders I've ever seen. They're incredible. I reached
they're
out
real pastel-y. I've seen those.
Yeah, they're just incredible looking. And he said he sold all the ones that were he knew what I was looking for when I asked him about them. I said, hey, I'd love to get my hands on it. He's like, I already sold the ones that I know you would like, John. So I'll probably grab one or two of them off him next year. But with my purple people eater projects, that's what I focused on, was keeping the lavenders blue. And when you get to that double visual, they have a real nice purple blue look. Super Arctic Conda ones, I mean, good, bad? Did they develop in
Yeah, they look good. I have two more this year. One came out with a defect, unfortunately. Every other baby in the whole clutch was fine. That one had a defect. And I have another one. I'd say they're pretty good. They look, I mean, they're interesting because, Boss Hogs has the Super Arctic, and I hatched out some of just Super Arctic, Lav Sables this year without Conda. And the funny thing is, I've seen in his pictures, like when they get older, they're like really vivid contrast. So like they got that interesting sable cast, but their background seems to be fairly light. Although I'm thinking in person, it's actually probably darker looking than on camera. But I could show you, but they haven't had their growth sheds yet, their first official real shed. And so, I would like to see those compared to the Conda ones. But the Conda ones seem to have better, like, background pigmentation for some reason. They just seem to be overall, like, deeper pigmented. So far, I like the Condas, like, quite a bit better. But they're both very different looking. And obviously, the Super Arctic Lav Sable as it is really, really good, because you could just breed it to like Arctic Conda double hat, and then you can get your Condas. So they're equally good. But I like the purple people eater stuff. I'd say I like it better than Storm Cloud, but I don't know. I like them all, but they all have their different unique looks. But I mean the Lav Sable stuff. The funny thing is, like, I had one original Lav Sable from Dan, and it was his first one he actually hatched. And, it wasn't the most impressive looking snake. But as it got older, once it hit like 2.5, man, the sable increases. You could actually see it a lot in this animal. And its saddles got like really, really dark. And it got a lot more interesting and a lot prettier. And it definitely looked more like what you'd expect a Lav Sable to kind of look like, I guess. But the Arctic and the Super Arctic definitely enhance it. I missed on the Super this year. I hatched out like about 5 or 6 Super Moons from my Sable Lav projects, and none of them hit on the Sable too. So I got a bunch of I got one Super that's 100% het, and then the other Super Lavs are all 66 het Sable.
Now, when yours hatch out, I mean, I know when I hatched out my first ones years ago, I was disappointed. And then when they first came out of the egg, are yours like a burnt orange almost?
Dude, one hatched out like fucking basically looked like yours and Mitch's, like, a dumbed down version of that cutout poster. It was like orange and like purplish alien pink. That one was the coolest though. But a lot of them kind of looked like almost like faded out, kind of like, or I wouldn't say faded, but like maybe they almost looked like a less impressive like Mai Tai combo.
Yes.
They kind of look like a Mai Tai combo.
I remember when I patched my first ones, I was like, oh man, how disappointing is this? You know what I mean? And but then they turned into stunners, man. I mean, I know. Here, I'll give.
Yeah, Time definitely does the Lav Sable stuff a lot of favors. Time does that project a lot of favors because actually there was one Moonstone I hatched out. Actually, I didn't even know it was a Sable until about like 2 weeks later. I started looking at it more. I'm like, wait a minute, this one's a fucking Sable.
Yeah, here's a older one right here, but
that's pretty cool. Look at how dark those saddles are, and then you can see the sharp contrast there too.
Yeah, it's a nice big female. She's probably, I don't know, maybe 300 grams or so, maybe a little bit bigger. I don't know. I stopped weighing them a long time ago. You know how it is. Like you start just knowing when they look like they're going to be ready to breed instead of like being like, all right, they need to be, you know, so many grams or whatnot. You just look at their heads. They got that big old beefy head when they're, you know, it's just like it happens overnight almost that their heads just broaden out. They look like they can actually lay an egg instead of getting egg bound. So,
yeah, you look at their tails too, their ventral.
Yep.
All right. So I don't know. Change my mind. Double visuals to triple visuals. I don't know what we're changing. I don't know. They're both good. I'm not going to change your mind on that one.
So, all right. Change your mind. Double visuals better than triple visuals. You know, I think there's certain instances where things complement each other enough. I think Snowburst is one of them. You know, I don't know. I don't like Snowburst that much. I'm not, like I said before, I'm not a big fan of snow, but it looked different. But one that I'm working on right now is that Sable Lavender Axanthic. And all three of those like complement each other well enough that I think it will look cool, especially with Arctic and Super Arctic playing around in it. But only time will tell. This last year, I've bred them now for 2 years. Still haven't hit the triple. This next year, I'll have a lot more females going. So hopefully we can see. I think the importance there is, more is not always better, but having the right genes going together instead of just throwing things together. And, you know, Toffee Glow was one of them. You know, I think people back in, you know, that was one of the first, that was one of the infancy ones. I remember people in Europe making the double visuals those long time ago. And, you know, they just wanted to see what it was. And both of those albinos don't complement each other very well. That's why people went after, you know, snows. You breed Axanthic and albino together because it complements each other well. But I think just focusing on that is important, especially in your breeding programs. You know, you go after what you want to see, not what the market is asking you for.
Yeah.
So
that's the one thing too. Like a lot of times, you're saying, John, like, if you do like say a combination like lavender toffee, or say even like, you know, lavender Axanthic, or if you're doing like lavender sable, as soon as you put albino in it, the albino is removing all the unique aspects of those T-pos and the melanin. So you're wiping out all the melanin. So you're wiping out, you know, it's a reducer. It's it's an amelanistic animal. And that's the one thing with a lot of the hognose morphs. A lot of them are essentially depleter genes. You know, like a hypo, a caramel, a toffee, an albino, even a lavender. They deplete pigment in one sense. So if you combine enough of them, you're just going to keep getting a more and more faded animal, and it can get a bit redundant. Then you got some enhancers like, you know, Super Arctic is an enhancer in itself, but it's a major disruptor. It does a lot of things. It's kind of like a bit of a little bit of everything. And then you got basic stuff like amelanistic. Albinos are just remove the melanin. And then you have your enhancers like Sable and Swiss. And then you got pattern disruptors like Conda and then Skullface. But, you know, the thing is, you know, it'd be nice to have more enhancers. We need more enhancer genes. That's the one issue. It's like, because if you stack all of this stuff, you know, obviously like toffee and pink pastel, it's not going to do a whole lot. As a baby, some of this stuff, it's going to look more interesting as babies. But once the pigments mature, then some of these things are going to be kind of hard to tell apart. So on the topic of double and triple visuals, how's the market for you too? Do a lot of people go for them, or does it vary?
That's a little bit all over the place. I mean, the market's strong. I mean, you know, there's more and more people getting into hognose snakes all the time. You know, I don't have. I think people are always looking for those investment type animals with the doubles and triples, and they're just looking further on down the road to be able to make those projects that they're looking for. You know, and I have a lot of people that come to me for, you know, the storm cloud stuff, the sable lavender stuff, and, you know, and at some points you're like, I made too many, and then all of a sudden you don't have any almost. I had that problem with the Arctic Conda sunbursts that were het for lavender this year. I made, you know, a decent amount of them, and I'm down to my last one already, you know, and it's not even what, I mean, I'm just getting ready to go down for brumation, but, you know, I've only had them out of the egg for, you know, between 4 and 6 months right now. So.
All right, Brandon asks, how long does it take for lab sables to start expressing their final form? I think it's like for a long time, kind of. I mean, because they're always changing. That one I had from Dan, it actually, from the time it was like 18 months old to like 2.5, it changed a lot. So yeah, it seems like probably what, about 2-3 years, and I'm sure they changed a little bit after that, but it's probably more minute. So it's really seeming like 2 to 3 years these things really need, and that's kind of a cool thing because your animal is kind of always improving or at least changing, however you want to look at it. So that's pretty cool.
I got that same thing. Like my male, you know, first it was my female that was, you know, awesome looking, and I thought it was, you know, superior. Then my male, the same thing. It was about 3 years before it actually, I feel like, got its final color form. And that thing, I mean, I don't have it in this room. It's in the next room. But I mean, this thing is like purple. It's incredible looking. So he's the father to, you know, some of the stuff that's in here. But, you know, I used the other ones and other animals to make some of the other hets this year. So
very cool. And we got I think we got pretty much all those questions rounded up. We got Toto Palooza. I'm guessing that's AJ. I'd say that's definitely AJ based on the question so far.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know who that is. That could be AJ.
Yeah. See, it might be. If it's not, I'd be pretty surprised. It could be somebody. I don't know. It's definitely somebody from the Discord. I can tell that for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see if we have it. He says nope. All right. Could be somebody else, maybe. All right. So far, I think that's all the questions. You want to talk about anything else? Any other cool? I mean, we can go on more, but we could always. We're gonna do another one at some point.
Yeah, but. I mean, like I said, we have so much that we could offer to these people and talk about different subjects. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I think the hognose market is extremely strong. It's amazing, you know, the accomplishments that have been done over the last 10 years with this species. And I think it's a cornerstone for the reptile community. These guys are probably one of the better pet snakes, in my opinion. I think ball pythons, boa constrictors, corn snakes are good. You know, but I have a soft spot for these guys. You know, they're a unique species, and whether it's their little upturned snouts or, you know, the diversity of colors now, I'm just excited for everything. I mean, I finally am having fun with the clutches, with it not being just albino and not albino, or toffee and not, you know, now, you know, we're getting, you know, some of these Mai Tai clutches and multiple gene clutches where it's a kaleidoscope when these things hatch. And I just love that aspect of it. So the future is bright, but I want to see a piebald. I think.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, that would be just. I know some people are working with the Lucy gene, but I don't know how replicatable that.
I don't think so. I'd say no way. No way.
Yeah, I don't.
I'll bet my life on it. Like consistently, like, you know, obviously you could pop up more of those. But yeah, I agree. The hognose market. I think the one problem is like expectations got shifted to like there's like a 1 or 2 year period where the hognose market was like bananas, and that's not gonna, like, that isn't normal. You're not supposed to be able to put up 20 or 30 grand of hognose every few weeks and sell out of them all the time. That's not sustainable. But yeah, the hognose market, I mean, obviously money is an interesting and important aspect of it, because money is definitely a tool to reinvest and then also rewards you for your time and efforts. And that's really nice to say, hey, what we're doing, this is, you know, valuable, this is worthwhile. And it still is. But yeah, the one thing is, there's like obviously a lot of stuff like Arctic and Arctic Conda. Everybody who's invested in hognose kind of already has those. So an Arctic and Arctic Conda by itself anymore, and sometimes in a lot of cases, even super Arctics aren't so much of investment animals anymore, and they're going to be more somebody that wants to just entry level start breeding or just a pet hognose. And so it's important to always be working on new projects, investing if you want to see, decent returns. The hognose markets, again, it's really good. It's just not going to be ultra easy. But at the same time, hognose market is easier than most of the other markets because hognose are so damn popular for good reason.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, Jeff. Like, I think a lot of people need to set expectations, when they get into this. If, starting a reptile business is multifaceted for sure. You need to have some business acumen. You need to have a love for the animals, and you need to be able to work and get, the things done. And I think having all of those different parts, moving parts inside of a business to be successful is challenging sometimes. And it gives people an opportunity to learn. So
we got 2 people requesting to see your Arctic permafrost.
Okay. I got a pretty big one over here.
That's what it sounds like what they want to see. I think somebody above said they wanted to see a bigger one too.
No, she's not giant yet or anything, but
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, here's a Arctic permafrost right here.
Wow, that's really pretty.
Yeah, and then I showed you that super Arctic one as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's cool. Reminds you kind of like a storm cloud a little bit, but there's definitely more stuff going on.
Oh yeah, yeah. They kind of like a really like bleached out storm cloud, like almost like a negative photo.
Yeah, it's pretty. I like this color mutation. This is one. I've got some in the other room. I tell you what, though, the almost point. I know you've asked me for them before, Jeff, and told you whenever you're ready. But my line of frosts are just incredible looking. These things. These are just frosts right here, and they actually do have like a blue-green look to them.
Yeah, yellowish.
But they're just amazing animals, and that's what a lot of these permafrosts come from. And I think that has an influence on their pattern for sure, and what we're seeing in some of the Arctic permafrost that I have, the super Arctics. But these are really cool animals. And then the albino version, you can kind of see it like we talked about before, the albino kind of wrecking some of the other things that are going along with it. But here's the albino frost version. She's pretty cool as well. But all these are het for sable. I did make that one. I still have it over here. I call it the weird caramely thing. This is the male that came out, but I'm not sure what he is. He's a caramel for sure, but he's just a very aberrant looking one that came out of the group. He was the only one that wasn't typical looking like the rest of the frosts. So I'm still not sure about this one right here.
Yeah, it looks like a really weird looking caramel. What was the pairing on that?
Those frost to frost.
Okay. So that is a frost to frost, and you did get a caramel from frost to frost.
Yep.
Yeah, I bred a frost to caramels, and out of 17 eggs, I got all frost.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's only been a variation that's happened once out of that pairing. So
interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think, it goes back when we could talk about that till we're blue in the face too, and just how related caramel is to hypo and how they show up independently from each other. There are, hypo to hypo that show no caramel ever, but
yes, I've seen that.
Mm-hmm, yeah, but it's not uncommon for those to show up together as well, though. In those lines, and you should get frosts and everything.
Yeah, it seems like once you have caramels, you can produce like hypos from them at some point. Especially if you have one that is able to, and then you start breeding those, then everything's coming out of hypo. I had all these outcrossed het caramels, and I bred them back to other het caramels, and all of them were also producing hypos. So that's statistically like impossible. It basically like me playing blackjack and getting blackjack like 30 times in a row. It's like this just keeps happening. And I did a lot of head-to-heads, a lot of outcross head-to-heads. The one interesting thing is this year I did I think I'll have to look at my notebook, but I think I did 10 het frost to het frost. So these are just head to head. And I got only frost and normals. That's it. Only frost and normals. And I hit 20.
So no separated recessive genes showing up, but only the double visual.
Yes, what's supposed to be a double visual, and it's showing up 25% of the time. It's acting as an independent recessive when I had it isolated to itself. But then when it's like outcross, and I did this one too, like this one. I did one het caramel. I mean, I did multiple het caramels, and there would be like hypos in almost every clutch. There was one clutch where all I got was fucking hypos. I had like 4 or 5 hypos and like 10 normals from a het caramel to a het caramel.
That's weird. Yeah, it's neat how they're showing up, and that's the reason why I kept that one back is I'm not expecting anything crazy out of it. You know what I mean? But it would be neat to see how it reacts with just another caramel animal, and just see if it, just see how it plays around with it. So, because it shouldn't have been that way, but it was.
Yes.
So it's just interesting. It could, it could just be missing something in its sequence there that is given that. So.
Oh, I know who Totapalooza is. That would be Noah. That's Noah.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well, she wants to see. I got a couple of them. They're not adults in this room, but I've got.
All right, then that's AJ. Then if he's busy with them, he's busy with the move.
So there's a super Arctic Conda Mai Tai. It's not an adult.
Oh yeah,
but...
Trinity wanted to see that. Those are looking well. Here's the problem: they look better in person than they do on camera. Although that's catching it pretty good. That's showing the contrast really nice. It actually looks really beautiful there.
Yeah, and then here's a super Mai Tai, which I think they suck, but they sure, I like patterns, so I will always pick, this one. But it'll be cool for breeding. I'm planning on, so this one I'm going to be breeding that Super Conda Arctic Storm Cloud to probably in 2026. So that's what this snake will be for right there. Just to go down the acid rain window there. I personally I have this really nice male, just super Arctic Mai Tai. Of course, he just came out of the water, but he's a really nice saturated colored one.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like the super Arctic Mai Tais. They're interesting. They're like browns, top colors, and pinks. They're very interesting. So you got one here, John. Are there any cons with raising hogs in a sterile environment? Do you guys think there are any potential downsides to this practice regarding their immune system development?
I don't know. That's a great question. You would have to go down the rabbit hole of what are you exposing your snakes to at that point in time. I don't think there's a con because it's not like it's like a worldwide thing that they're getting exposed to. These are animals in a captive environment. So I think there isn't a con there in knowing that you have healthy animals. But I would say the con would be is if you did expose them to a very infectious pathogen. It could take over them quicker than I guess it could a wild animal. But I think it all points to what we already know. If somebody walks around and wears a mask 24/7 and isn't sick for 5 years, the first time they get the flu, they're going to be terribly sick. But that guy that was out there licking door handles, every week, and he gets a runny nose from time to time, probably won't get as sick as that person that is, you know, keeping themselves in that type of environment. So, you know, I don't know. That's like a double-edged sword right there to discuss and talk about. You know, these are captive animals. We're not going out there unless you're going out and doing like educational events or, you know, just passing them around out in the streets to a bunch of people. You know, I don't know. That's a tough question.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's interesting. I mean, the thing with that though is like, you know, I think some people, this one, I'm not saying the person is doing this, but this is one way somebody could interpret this. Or somebody's going to have a similar question. And I think a lot of times, and it makes sense, you know, a lot of people anthropomorphize to a degree. And it makes sense. That's how we're going to understand things. You know, it's a very common practice. You just don't want to overdo it. But people liken these things to, like, yeah, human sicknesses, diseases. Like, we get viruses all the time. We have different, like, you know, people get bacterial infections. There's a lot of things that can happen. But with snakes, there's really not too much that's happened. It's either bacterial infections or they're getting a worm or like a protozoa. There's not like all these different viruses that they're getting and stuff. And if they are, we're not seeing them and they're building up antibodies to them. But like John saying, it's like, well, what are you going to do? Like, we don't really want to keep them dirty and expose them to their own bacteria too much. In the wild, they're not even being exposed to their bad bacteria too much. No. I'd say the only thing is we're just not exposing them to a bunch of different bacteria that they may encounter in the wild. So yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like, essentially we're forced into keeping them sterile just for their own health. So I don't think there's really, you know, much doubt. Like, you know what? I took some hognoses outside. This is actually an interesting one. And I had the video. I don't really post on TikTok, but it was like 2.5 years ago and it's posted on my TikTok. And it's by one of my adult leucistics outside. And, you know, it's smelling grass. And you know how they are, John. If you take them in a new environment, there's a lot of new smells there. So they actually start flicking their tongues very rapidly. And this person saying that you can't take your snake out like that. Your snake's never been outside. It's going to catch it's going to get some bacteria it's not used to. And it's going to kill it. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. I was like, you take snakes outside all the time. You know, they don't, like, it's not like a human. You know, and the thing is, like, you know, no matter how many animals I've taken outside, I've never had, obviously, an issue with those ones bringing them back inside and, like, something happened.
No, I agree. And, you know, I'm going to be doing something. I spoke with you a little bit about it. This spring, I'm actually going to be setting up a pair of adult snakes and keeping them outside.
Okay.
You know,
a little outdoor enclosure.
Throughout an entire 365 days and see how they react. And, you know, it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm not putting them out there in an aquarium, obviously. They're going to be in, like, an enclosure. You know, you've seen it, Jeff. I don't know if a lot of, you know, the people watching have, but, you know, I've begun keeping large turtle enclosures outside and seeing how the turtles are reacting in the wild in these giant enclosures versus what I saw inside in the captive environment was life-changing for me. So I just want to see how these hognose snakes do as well. I feel like we live in an area that we probably could do that as long as I give them enough burrowing substrate to be able to get away from the weather, and they would be okay. So I'm going to actually check it out and see what's going on.
Yeah, our climate is, like, perfect for plains hognose. It's just our habitat here is not. So yeah, if you make that outdoor habitat, I know in the Platt study he did outdoor setups for them and everything, and I forget, like, it was like 2 years of observation, and they were like these, like, 4x4 foot enclosures, and they were, like, kind of like, it sounds like they're attached to, like, a building, but they were partially outside, something like that. So yeah, I think if you you know, I mean, I think that'd be pretty cool to do. That's an awesome idea. Just dig down some footers. The thing is, too, like, if you get down in the clay, luckily we have a lot of clay. Hognose isn't going to keep, I don't know, they can keep digging in that. So you might want to, I mean, are you going to put down some footers so they can't dig too much and you fill it up so they have, like, a 3-foot digging range?
That's exactly what I'm going to do. That's exactly what I'm going to do, because I think, like, just what you said, they wouldn't dig through the clay.
Oh, they might over time. They get in there, and every time they might come back more and more.
Well, here's the thing: a mole will.
Yeah. True. You know, yeah. Oh, then they'll. Yeah. Then they're fucking out of there.
And that thing will be gone. So
yeah.
You know, you're going to have to make it, you know, impenetrable from that side. I'm going to screen in the bottom of it, you know, and that's it. What morphs are you using to test? Okay, I'm going to use a normal and a sable. I'm using both of those animals to put outside.
Yeah, that's a good idea. How big are you going to make the enclosures?
Almost exactly with what you said, about 4x4.
Okay.
I am going to have it about 3 foot of a depth and about 2 foot above ground. They're going to be exposed to the southern facing sun from the time it comes up till it goes down. It's going to be in addition to the part of my turtle enclosure out there, because I've already got water out there that's plumbed out there to it and everything along those lines. So it'll be perfect for them out there.
Yeah, that's cool, dude. That'll be really neat to see. I've seen them basking in the wild. Like I haven't found a lot. I found a total of 9 in my life. But yeah, seeing them hanging around grass clumps and stuff, it's pretty interesting. So, and are you gonna like plant some like natural prairie grasses there and everything?
Yep.
Nice, man.
Sure am. I'm probably going to end up putting like a Ring camera on it or something like that. So if I can integrate that into like a live feed that someone could like just jump on and be like, hey, I'm going to go watch the hognose snake and see what it's doing. That'd be cool. So
the nice thing will be is the maintenance. You don't really have to spot clean or worry too much about that.
No, it'll be interesting. And, I'm probably not going to feed them on the same schedule that the captive ones are. But I'm going to probably feed them like every 10 to 14 days. And, and that's if I can find them. That's going to be the weirdest part, is if
make a hognose lunchbox. Hognose, man, they'll come like in the wild. They found ones raiding turtle nests and then coming back a few days later and going right back in that turtle nest. So I was going to make these things. I haven't done it yet. I was going to call them hognose lunchboxes. Basically, you just make a little box, hole in the center, and just keep putting food in there and bury it. And they'll learn. And then it's all you got to do is put the food in there, and they'll keep coming back for it eventually.
Oh, 100%. That's a good idea. It's a good idea.
We're going to put a hog on cam, whip a cool one out. The way you keep phrasing this is interesting, Reps in Texas.
Oh, you know how he's phrasing it. He wants to see a pink pastel, Jeff. You got one for him?
I got a pink pastel for you, fucker. I got the funny thing is we were talking about pink pastels. I have one customer that says, like, because I told him like none of my PPAs I've seen any neurological issues. He says his has one, but it's very minor. He says it looks up a lot and sometimes like moves its head very oddly. He says, but it's very, very minor. Huh. So
yeah, I haven't seen any with what we used to see back in the day, or read about, honestly, because I never seen one in person acting that way. But
no, I haven't seen one yet either, other than like this one I sold, I guess, has minor ones. I've heard like one guy overseas says, like, he goes, they always look up, and he bought PPAs from actually he's only bought like one for me, and I know he's bought a bunch from other people. So he says they just look up all the time. I'm like, maybe things just want food. I don't know. I mean, I'm not seeing it. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'm skeptical of some of the stuff I hear until like I actually see it, because
That's awesome.
Brand says use live mice. You can do that like with fuzzy mice and stuff. Yeah, you could do that, but then they move around, and you don't want that mouse like getting lost and like starving to death somewhere. So, but you can still do a live mouse in the hognose lunchbox. Ooh. How many outdoor enclosures are you going to do? Like you said, like 2?
Yeah, probably just 2. That's all I want to do for now. It's not, like a big scientific study or anything. I just want to see how they act in the wild,
Yeah. I think it'd be really cool.
In the wild, but just outside, because I was amazed by the turtles. Like when I had the turtles inside, they would come up, they would eat out of my hands. They would always want to come see me. And literally 24 hours after you put out these turtles outside, they act like wild turtles. They drop down in the ponds. They get away from you as quick as they possibly can. And this happened. So this happened not only with the ones I've had for a year, which isn't really that long a time before I put them outside, but ones that my friend has had for upwards of a decade. And he said, there's no way that these turtles are going to act like that. They'll always come up and see you. And it was literally the same 24 hours. They acted like a wild turtle.
Did they ever like get used to them though, then relearn? Because like I've seen like, wild turtles, you feed them and they'll come up to you and stuff. So I guess you have to retrain. I've heard the same thing with lizards. Dave Mankey said he had this rhino iguana, and he says it's the nicest, iguana he had. And he's like, it sounded like it was pretty much target trained. He would be able to pick it up. It was very calm. He said he took it outside to one day, and he went to bring it back in because he put it in his like outdoor enclosure. He said the thing went nuts, was thrashing. He said he sprayed it with cold water with a hose until it got like real cold, and he grabbed it and took it inside. He said he goes, he never did that again. He said the thing went like nuts.
Yeah, no, I mean I know what you mean, Jeff. Like you have those turtles. Like I have turtles in my pond that I like going out and seeing and feeding. You know what I mean? I'm a big fan of snapping turtles. So if I ever find one on the road, I just come back and throw it in my pond. And, you know, eventually I just want to have these big giant snapping turtles that come up and I can feed out of my hand. But, you know, I don't know. You know, this is year one with the turtles, you know, acting like turtles outside. So we'll see what the long term is like. Towards the end of the summer, some did start getting a little bit more used to me. I think they just got tired of dropping off their ramps into the water. And, you know, they were the ones that are like, yo, this guy's not going to come over and like mess with us kind of thing. So they were learning there towards the end. But, you know, it was just amazing. And I wonder if the hogs will do the same thing. If, you know, I take one that, you know, is very food motivated and, you know how some of these hognose snakes are, like you crack the tub and they come flying out wanting to bite everything that, you know, runs into their face. I'm wondering if they'll act more like a wild snake, but still have that, you know, the ability to eat like I'm going to want them to, you know, so that'll be a neat little test right there for sure.
That will be.
I do know that there is one other person that is talking about doing this as well. And they're also doing it with bull snakes.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, as soon as you said bull snakes, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I could see him wanting to that seems like something he'd be into. The one thing is, though, too, it's going to be your approach, though, too, with the ones outside, since they're going to be at a low level, your stance above them is going to be way higher, and, you know, that can be putting off. Even in the tubs, you know, sometimes when you're really hovering over them versus when you handle them or to get used to, you're, like, closer in proximity or you're holding them, and you become part of their environment, then they're way easier to approach. You know, I have had wild hognose. I have some right now, and they are kind of like jittery. The funny thing is, though, like I've had this happen a couple times where you got wild hognose, and then 2 days later you give them like a frozen thawed fuzzy, or you give them a live fuzzy, and they're eating it. And it's weird because it's like, man, this thing was just like crawling around for the last probably 7 years, and now in captivity, you know, it's eating. Yeah, just like in this little fucking enclosure.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I think this species, you know, it's much different than the Platyrhinus and Simus. You know, they're way different. You know, they're less nervous, and I think you would, you know, always have better success with this species. But no, you are right. It'll be interesting. And what would be an interesting observation is if I seen one play dead that I put out there.
Yeah,
you know, really go into like the defensive posture, which, you know, as well as I do, it's very limited inside of our collection. It's mostly out of babies that are coming out.
Exactly. Funny thing is, though, John, like I've actually gotten 2 adults to play dead outside.
Oh, wow. That makes sense.
So that would kind of,
I mean, I wonder, you know, what the UV just that their spectrum and seeing that would, I don't know. There's going to be a lot of learning. With this,
part of it too, an adult being outside all of a sudden, there's a bunch of new smells. There's probably some wild instinct there because it's like, you know, it's realization. It's, you know, they're like, you know, they don't have like a learning curve like a human where, you know, hey, we have to learn how to hunt or get food. They instinctively know how to do that. And the other thing is too, it's again, they're outside, these new smells, they're getting this instinctive, you know, natural reaction to their environment. And then again, I'm like towering over them, nearly 6 feet above them. And then, you know, they're getting, so that's all making them more inclined to do that. Because I've had like at least 2 adults play that outside. I actually on my old Instagram, it's gone now. I don't even have any of those photos because they're from like one of my phones back then. But the one was an adult lemon ghost, and she is playing dead in the grass. And yeah, I've had 2 adults play dead, taking them in a while. And that's just like, you know, taking them out just one time. Now they definitely needed some, like, you needed to kind of instigate it a bit, like me, like hovering over them and stuff like that. But yeah, no, it'd be interesting. With yours though, you're going to be running something long term. I just took my fucking snakes outside for the day.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting, you know, just going in and maybe even because I am going to take data measurements. You know, I'm going to weigh them, you know, periodically throughout the year. and just have some data set points to know, the health of the animal. You're going to want to inspect them. I'm not going to want to put them out there and just be like, oh, it's dying. I'm just going to leave it out here and die. So
yeah, it's not National
I'm
Geographic.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think it could be sensory overload for these guys as well. I mean, you taking them out of tub environment, that's their sky. I mean, when when they come in and everything's limited. Inside of their environment, they don't know anything different. And I had that same experience with my cats. I had 2 house cats, and we moved out here in the country, and I took them outside in the yard for the first time. They'd never even been outside. And the way that they looked up at the sky, they were terrified.
I took Patio outside. I was holding her, and she's been outside a few times, but this time it was very windy, and it was like a month ago. So a bunch of leaves fell, and her head was like jittering like this, trying to follow all the leaves. Yeah, it kind of was like overwhelming for her.
Yeah, so it could be the same for the hognose snake. So
could be. Yeah, well, they're going from a comfortable environment that they're used to because they recognize it to a whole new environment that they don't recognize, new smells. They got the sun, so there's probably some realization instinctively that they are vulnerable. They're out in the open, and then I'm hovering over them. And so John Caro's taking off. Thanks for joining, John. Yeah, it's been a long one.
Yeah, thanks, John.
And we have one. What's the most exciting project you two are working with long term? So that's a good question, and it's very open to interpretation.
Storm cloud lavenders. I'm trying to make a blue snake, like a real blue snake. And storm cloud so far has been the closest thing that I can say is like a blue snake. I mean, some of the super Arctic sables are also, but I do have Arctic involved in all of these projects. But I want to try and make a true blue hognose snake. So I think the Mercury sable or storm cloud lavender, however you want to call it, will be the next step there. So hopefully this year I'll see what it looks like. I have some Mercuries that are 66. I have a couple Arctic Mercuries 66 het sable that I'm going to try and prove out. And then I have the Arctic triple hets that I have a decent amount of females going this year. I want to say I'll have 4 females going this year with that project. So hopefully I can see where that one's going.
Very cool. Yeah, I'd say long term it's polygenic stuff. That's like, it depends. Like, again, like I kind of like sometimes maybe overthink this stuff, but long term, lemon ghost, purple extreme red. Just say lemon ghost red stuff. And then certain Swiss projects. I got some pretty cool Swiss projects coming up. Hopefully have some Swiss caramel, Swiss frost stuff. And then I'm going to be doing more Xanthic Swiss combos.
Nice.
So those pretty much, I mean, that'll keep us busy for a while. That's the thing. When you start working with like double and triple recessives, they keep you busy for a very long time.
I tell everyone 7 years. You're thinking 7 years for a project when you start going down that road. And, whenever I make something, when I made my first super Arctic Mai Tais, I already had a project that I wanted to do with them, when they were adults. So I made those ingredients the following year to plug to them. So, I think just being forward thinking on that and what you want to see happen. So, yeah.
This guy says, can he have a permafrost? It's his birthday. It's been his birthday every day for a little while here.
Yeah, no joke. Hey, you're working with some permafrost, I assume, at this point, Jeff. Maybe you'll be making them in the next year or so, but I'll be doing a lot of stuff with them. I do have another project. I'm making permafrost lavenders as well. I've got a lot of hets for those. This year I made some sunbursts that are 100% het for permafrost lav. I really wish the albino gene wasn't in there, but it is what it is.
Albino pops up fucking everywhere, man.
Yeah, I actually found out it was het albino before these eggs hatched because I had I had offspring from my Arctic lavender female that I used for that project that I bred this year, and albinos popped out, and I knew that I bred my permafrost to that Arctic lavender, and I knew he was het albino. So once I seen that, I knew the possibilities of sunburst coming out was there, and I made them. So
yeah, I have this one, a few frosted and caramels. Dude, I bred this one, like, I'll tell you what, it was a crazy one. It was an Axanthic Swiss. This Axanthic Swiss was 66 het toffee, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
And he turned out not to be het toffee. Guess what he turned out to be het for?
Het albino.
Yeah, dude, like, there was no history of albino, and obviously there was. It's just the original het Swiss that I used for that project was also het albino. I didn't know. And I'm like, son of a bitch. I really didn't really want this guy to be het albino. And then some of my frosted turned out to be het albino. They weren't even supposed to be pos het. And they're throwing albinos.
Yeah.
You can't get away from this shit. I was like, I guess you just kind of just accept it. As long as it's not all visual albinos, as long as you're breeding het to hets, you know, you don't have to like, deal with it too much, I guess.
Yeah.
So will you guys be able to make Super Arctic Storm Cloud soon? John, sooner than me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could have made them this last year. I will be making them next year. I've got a lot of Arctic Conda sables that are 100% hets that I'm going to be breeding with visual stuff. So, yeah, I made some of them Axanthic Arctics this year. They're freaking amazing, dude. Like, you know, from some of my Storm Cloud stuff. So, I'm happy with those. I'll probably be making a decent amount of them next year. Storm Cloud's one of the things I really like. So, I don't see myself slowing down on making the different combos there.
Yeah, I like Storm Clouds a lot. I like them really quite a bit. It's interesting to look at them to the next to the Axanthic Swiss. They're very, very different looking. The Storm Clouds definitely have way more of a blue tone, especially as babies, though.
I mean, honestly, I should and could make a decent amount of them next year, just from the, you know, Storm Cloud Lab project stuff, you know, as a byproduct almost.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
You know, we'll see.
All right. We've been talking for 3.5 hours. I think that's pretty good. So I want to go work on some stuff, and I'm sure you probably want to also. We'll do this again maybe in probably a few months, I'd say. Maybe we do
That's cool.
Follow-up in February, March, April.
Nah, it sounds like a good time. I'll be in the full swing of breeding by then, and we'll be able to talk about more exciting stuff. So,
all right. Sounds good. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Thanks to our guest, John, for talking hognose. This is a good chat because it's just kind of us just talking hognose. That's kind of what I wanted it to be. Just like, you know, not really like an interview, just discussing stuff as two hognose enthusiasts.
Yep.
So, all right. See you, John. See everybody else. We're out. Ending stream. Clicking.